Hello students, welcome to your mains discussion for GS3, the science and tech portion. Although it was only 4 or 5 questions that have come from that particular topic, but what we have to focus on is whether or not we are able to interpret these questions properly, and is there any risk of misalignment of our content. So that is what we have to worry about. Let's go question by question. I'm going to help you decipher the questions also so that we have more clarity on what we are trying to write. The first question in this series was about, this was question number 5. This was about intellectual property rights. The question reads, what is the present world scenario of intellectual property rights with respect to life materials? So the first thing I want us to pay attention to is this portion that we are talking about only life materials, right? The first sentence of the question is a part of the question itself. So this will become my first paragraph. Body paragraph 1 has to be, what is the status, the present world scenario of intellectual property rights? First part of the question. Second part of the question is, although India is second in the world in filing patents, still only a few have been commercialized. Now, this has to do with the situation that we have. This portion that India is second, this is a part of the problem statement. What I mean here is that they have only said that this is the situation, right? The question will follow that explain the reasons behind this less commercialization. They're asking you, why is it? Why is this problem occurring, right? So the second part of your answer has to be, body paragraph 2 has to be, what are the reasons behind this less commercialization? Do we understand this question now? We have to ensure that we're talking about IPR, which is a common topic in the syllabus. I'm sure everybody had this in their notes, but it has to be in context of life materials. Fair? And the second thing is that despite all of these large number of patents, we are still not able to have commercial applications of these patents. They're asking for the reasons for that. Fair? This means that in terms of the space proportioning in the answer sheet, as a 10-mark question, you have 2 pages in which here you give the introduction about IPRs and life materials. Body paragraph 1 has to be on the first page, which is what is the present scenario. Body paragraph 2 on the second page, which has to do with what are the reasons, and then we have the space for the conclusion on the second part, right? So in a 10-mark question with 2 pages, when you've been asked 2 elements of demand, our placement, our content has to be very, very clear, right? So that proportion has to be maintained. Now, in terms of another layer of question deciphering, we have to know what life material means. Life materials have to do with things to do with biotechnology, the patents to do with pharmaceuticals, and things to do with genetic engineering. At least this much we have to know for sure. And now when I add these keywords here, when I add here biotech, genetic engineering and pharmaceutical, now you can easily identify that I have covered these topics in my syllabus for sure. I have covered it in my test series for sure, which means that in the actual exam, what we have to worry about is, can I translate the question in a way to lead me closer to what I have studied? Fair? So UPSC has this knack of hiding the demand of the question in the language. We just have to train ourselves to identify what the answer is going to be. Let's talk about the answer now. First, let's talk about what your introduction is going to be. In order for me to introduce this question, I'm going to define intellectual property rights as a topic of your syllabus, as something you have prepared well. I expect that you have a clear, precise, and well-prepared introduction, a definition for intellectual property and intellectual property rights. You get to choose which one you're talking about. Then, you have to create a linkage to the question. You have to specify what life materials means, right? And then reiterate that India is second in the world in this particular scenario. Fair? Now, when you're describing the present world scenario, this has to be the first part of your answer, body paragraph 1. Here what I'm saying is the present world scenario for this thing, intellectual property rights to do with life materials, is that we have to comply with the TRIPS agreement, right? So TRIPS rules are there, we have to comply with it. It has to do with the GMO and bioengineered products, their movements, what patenting is allowed, what is not allowed. So you write one sentence covering this argument. Now across these arguments, I'm also going to mark out which are the ones that everybody would usually write and what are the other niche arguments that if you've included, your answer will feel enriched. So the thing about TRIPS compliance is that I expect everybody would have written this point in your answer. The second thing is that US and EU have a monopoly which is being challenged by India and China, right? China and India are emerging players, whereas US and EU tend to have the historical monopoly in these particular sectors. Here, you could also include the fact that according to the World Intellectual Property Report, these are the stats that are there, right? You can include that here, or you can also include that afterwards after describing the current scenario. Then, there is also global biopiracy concerns. This is an issue which is related to the topic of intellectual property rights, and you've been studying it not only in mains but also in prelims. So the concerns of countries like India, like Brazil, for whom their traditional knowledge is being usurped, and these monopolistic countries are using that knowledge and creating patents in their own name, is one of the aspects of the world scenario for intellectual property rights. The next thing that is there is that there are a lot of patent card disputes which are there, right? There are a lot of patents because of for whom there is a lot of dispute that occurs. There is a lot of infighting. There is a lot of question and answer that goes on. For example, the CRISPR technology, CRISPR-Cas9 technology, which is used to make multiple different products for agriculture, right? All those products are oftentimes under contention for various reasons, right? Whether it be the terminator gene, whether it may be the other aspects of the seeds. Fair? Then there are also ethical and legal issues to do with it. For example, patenting life forms itself is an ethical issue, whether or not it is right or wrong, right? There are also differences in different countries. European Union is more restrictive to do with GMO, right? Whereas United States is more liberal in that matter, which is why certain products cannot travel across countries. Then we also have the patent cooperation treaties and different agreements which are being executed and remarked upon whether or not they should continue. Now, among these, the points I would want everybody to include are the ones about TRIPS compliance, about global piracy issues, and this change of trend. Why I'm talking about this change of trend? Because the report was in news. The World Intellectual Property Organization report was in news, which is why we have to ensure that we are writing these points. The ones on the bottom, 1 out of these 3 are enough. But if you're writing more than 5, of course, it's a wonderful wonderful quantity of content that you've been able to deliver in the exam. Okay, so this was the first part of your answer. After writing this, there could be that need of writing a transition sentence. So if you're just saying that this is intellectual property rights, then you're talking about the present world scenario, then you could write a transition sentence that yes, India is second ranking in the world to do with patents in life sciences, lagging behind China, right? So you can write that here. And then we move to the second part of this answer. The second part of this answer has to do with the challenges in commercialization of patents in India. Fair. So this is the second part of what the challenges are, and you're supposed to talk about the reasons for it, right? The question was, see, although India is second, still only a few have been commercialized. Explain the reasons is what we have to write, which is why your second part of the answer has to be what are the challenges, and these reasons you need to explain, right? This is the explanation which is required of us. Fair. So what is required of us is that Challenges in commercialization of patents. Number one challenge is the lack of industry and academia linkage, right? There is a disconnect between institutions and the industry, because of which they are not able to, the academia is not able to create the products that the industry needs, and the industry, despite a lot of need, is not able to invest in projects that it needs. It has to be contrasted with the environment in other countries such as USA, China, and European Union, where there is a strong linkage, right? So you write this first point and you explain it here as a reason for the lack of commercialization. Now, in terms of the order of the points, lack of commercialization has to do with the industry, which is why the industry wala point has to come first. Fair? Now, the second thing is that there is the nature of the research itself, the nature of patents in life science itself, which involves a large cost of investment, right? So the cost of research and development is very, very high. Indian startups, Indian industries, Indian, private organizations, they all lacked that sort of scale of funds, because the amount of funds that are necessary, at least in the other countries, the amount of funds that are necessary are being infused by the industry itself. It is not on basis of one sector, right? So which is why it is that starting push which is missing in our country. So you just explain the second reason. The third reason is that there are regulatory barriers. See, in the way that I'm giving you the content, the way that we are discussing this solution, the points I'm giving you are the framework points. These are the things that we think. Of course, I do not mean that the only answer you write is regulatory barriers. No, but this is what I'm going to think, and I'm going to write a different sentence accordingly. So you can say that the regulatory process in India, the regulations in India create a slow and complex system, right? Why? Because you have to go get your approvals from different ministries, right? It is embroiled in a lot of controversy. All those things tend to happen, right? So commercialization of patents becomes delayed and the market moves forward. So it is easier for companies to get a patent and commercialize the product in a different country and simply export it to India, as compared to doing the entire process in the country itself. So this is the third point about regulatory barriers. Fair. I would want you to pay attention here that the framework that we are using is common to the topic of intellectual property rights. This is the same structure that we would have used in any other question about intellectual property rights. See, intellectual property rights issues, there is no industry academia linkage. It is a high cost endeavor, right? There are gaps in regulatory barriers. Patent quality versus quantity varies. So these things are common for all patents, right? What you have to do in effective preparation is you create a framework for that particular topic, that particular theme that is applicable to multiple questions. And then you can easily handle applied questions as well. Fair. So this is what we keep on training you in your MGP program, right? So all of MGP students should be able to easily do these questions. Anyway, coming back. So patent quality versus quantity. What we are saying is, even though India is the second largest, applicant for patents for biotech, the quality of those patents, the output that they are capable of giving is not up to the mark as per market demand, right? So our patents, the new things that have been discovered, created are not particularly groundbreaking, right? They are not doing anything exceptional. Because of which those low quality patents and incremental patents, they're not able to get much traction in the market, which is why they don't have commercialization potential. Then there is also limited access to funding. Now, high R&D cost, high cost of research and development has to do with the process that has to sustain, right? Funding has to do with the organizations, the startups, right? The innovators, they themselves have limited access to funding. I'm not saying that there is no funds. I'm saying there is a limitation, meaning that the government policies are only giving a fund to set it up and not to actually sustain it throughout its life cycle. The sort of funds that are available are only available with certain sort of, conditions that are attached. Because of that, so at certain times, these startups might get limited, which means that funding should be throughout the life cycle, right? So it has to do with limited access to funding during the life cycle of the project. Now, it could feel that both of these points have to do with financing, so they can be put together, right? It is also plausible that you're writing one out of these two, which is also perfectly acceptable to us, right? Then weak infrastructure and licensing policies. Even though you create that patent, the infrastructure, the policies, the licensing agreements are not strong enough, which is why in India, oftentimes the patents are often blatantly flouted, right? So that creates a problem, right? So that ensuring the transition of the technology from the patent office till the industry, that is not very clear, which is the argument that we're making here. Naturally, writing examples here would be great. If you have those examples, please do ensure that they have to do with the bio, tech, pharma, right? All these sectors, which was life sciences sector. All right. So that was this portion of the question. Now, the question is effectively only asking you about these two. The question said that in the present scenario, we are lagging behind, right? And question says we are lagging behind China. We are number 2 in the world, or we can say that we are leading and we are number 2 in the world. So the present world scenario we have discussed, right? And the reasons behind this less commercialization we have discussed. Now comes the question of what has to be the conclusion. For you to write the conclusion, the understanding has to be that because we have moved in a progression of what a thing is, right? What is the significance and what are the challenges? The conclusion has to be way forward based, right? It can be way forward or it can be quotation based. Now, depending upon how much content you were able to write in your answer, right? Depending upon how much content you were able to answer, right? How much space you were able to fill and what is your writing speed. Taking all these 3 factors into account, you have to decide that, okay, body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2. You would have finished the answer till here. Now you have this space left. For this space, for students to maximize their marks, there is the trick, there is that skill of creating an implicit demand. Because my question is ending on challenges, I can include way forward, I can include certain solutions. Naturally, I'm not saying that I want you to include all 6, but there are different ways of maximizing your marks. You could have written 1 or 2 points about how to solve this problem. So here you could write a way forward based conclusion. You could also add a diagram here, wherein this sort of chart comes into play. So in the previous slides, when I'm showing you the bubble diagrams, there it was not that you have to make in that diagram format only. You get to choose. But if you had a sort of way forward, a sort of solution slide prepared for the topic of intellectual property rights, you can include it if you're able to fit it within that quarter page space, right? So this diagram could be included there as an implicit demand, as an optional element. I'm not saying that this is a part of the answer directly, but you could have included that if you had it prepared and if you had that sort of time, right? And writing ability. So recommendations for enhancing commercialization of patents in India. It has to do with create university industry linkage. You have to simplify the regulatory framework, encourage investment and hybrid funding. What else can you do? You can have global cooperation about this so that we can learn about the best in class practices. We can provide IPR education and training to youngsters and also to industry experts and industry experts in other aspects. Then also focus on high impact patents instead of superfluous patents, right? So all these points could be ways of creating a solution. You could have written 2, you could have written 1, you could have written this in a sentence also as a part of implicit demand to maximize your marks, right? As for conclusion, yes, this part of way forward you can write something to the tune of it having a very large scope in the upcoming future. You can talk about strengthening infrastructure and fostering global partnership is going to lead the way of change into the future. Such sentences could easily be used as a conclusion for this particular question. All right. So that was question number 5 about patents in life sciences. The next question for science and technology had to do with electronic toll collection technology. Let's look at this question carefully. It says that what is the technology being employed for electronic toll collection on highways, right? Clearly, this is the first part of the question. What is the technology being employed? Question part 1. Question part 2 is that second part of the question is what are its advantages and limitations? Fair. So second part of the question, very clear advantages and limitations. Then what are the proposed changes that will make this process seamless? Third part of the question. Fourth part, would this transition carry any potential hazards? Fair. So what is happening here is that in a 10-mark question, they have asked you 4 things. When they are asking you 4 things in one question, the challenge here becomes, can I fit all this information in the exam or not, right? Can I fit all this content in my answer or not? Because that is the situation, you have to be very, very careful about how you are going to place this content in the 2 pages, right? So when you have 2 pages for content, again, see, first part, what technology is employed, right? Introduction and first part, what technology is employed. They are asking you directly just to name, not to explain, right? That is first part. Advantages and limitations. I would want to divide it into advantage and limitation, which is the second part of my demand, right? So I am making a table so that I'm able to fit this content there. Then what are the proposed changes that will make it make this process seamless? So demand number 3, what are the changes, updates? Then would this transition carry any potential hazards? Again, what are the potential hazards? For me to fit all this content here, this sort of structuring would be necessary. Another alternative could be that instead of dividing my space for advantage and limitation, I divided between threats and changes and hazards, right? So you can choose between them, but what is very clear is that writing this entire answer without a tabular format becomes very, very difficult. Fair? So that is what I want you to understand for this question. Now, as for the content which is there, technology employed for electronic toll collection, most of the students will react with just the information about the RFIDs, right? FASTag, RFID, that thing you have to understand. But they're not just saying what is it for toll collection. They're asking the entire technology, which means that you can pad up your answer by writing about the entire system, which I'm demonstrating here. So in the introduction, you can define electronic toll collection. And here, the technology which is there, I'm writing it as a collection of technologies. First is RFID tags, right? Radio frequency, ID tags, fast tags. Then it also has to do with toll plazas with RFID readers. You, in the car, the driver, you have to have the RFID thing, that tag, but the toll booth also has to have the reader, right? You also need to have a cloud-based backend. It cannot be just on in the physical space of that particular toll booth, right? So it has to be in the cloud somewhere. Then it has to do with automatic vehicle identification system. Not only do you have to collect the toll, you also have to link it with the vehicle, right? So it is a bank linkage. It is also a vehicle linkage. It has to have interoperability because people will have different bank accounts in different types of cars and different, right? And so on and so forth. And toll collection agencies are also going to be multiple, right? Then mobile apps and wallet integration, which is already there. So in India, the electronic toll collection technology is including all of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now again, as I told you in the last slide, I told you that in this particular question, we are able to identify that we have to worry about spacing, which means that you cannot afford to spread this out. Either you are going to write this as a diagram, or you are going to be in that position where you are only describing about RFID tags. Fair? But again, in terms of making your answer competitive means it's not just a right answer. It is so good an answer that you are ahead in the competition. For that to happen, you have to have strong content, right? More content than your competitor. So you can write the entire set of technologies. Second part of the demand was advantages of electronic toll collection. Now I'm writing that separately here. I will show you the way that we are trying to put it in the page. So you do have to place it, making a table, trying to minimize the amount of space that you're using and maximize the content, right? But let's discuss the information first. So advantages of electronic toll collection. The first advantage is that it can reduce traffic congestion in our country. In multiple countries, we have a lot of congestion of traffic. Traffic gets jammed because the cars have to stop at the toll booth, pay the toll, and then the barrier opens and then you can move forward. So that is going to create stoppage times, which reduces the flow of traffic. It impedes the flow of traffic, because of which congestion can take place. So the advantage of ETC is the fact that it can reduce that congestion. So this was my first advantage. My second advantage is it also has environmental benefits. What that means is, let's say, the more your car is in an idle position, matlab the car is running and you're waiting for something else to happen. You are spending fuel, you're wasting time, and that has an enormous impact on the environment. Wasting fuel is a big challenge in the current scenario. It also has to do with not just wasting fuel, but also creating unnecessary emissions. So that also gets reduced, because of which I'm saying there are environmental benefits. Then there is also increased efficiency. Increased efficiency of the toll collection system itself. It is going to be more accurate. It is going to happen quickly, right? It will minimize human error. It will also minimize fraud, right? People cannot inflate the toll prices, right? So those things are reduced. It will also create cost savings for the entire system. Operational cost, which will be lower. Why? Because the manual labor which is included is going to reduce naturally, right? If it is an electronic toll collection booth, so then the need of manpower to handle the transaction is eliminated. So there are significant cost savings there. Additionally, there is transparency in the tax toll collection, which is why I was saying that, see, in increased efficiency, we were talking about the fact that people will not be able to inflate the toll. People will not be able to defraud the toll. On the other side also, there cannot be issues of absconding people, right? You cannot threaten the toll collection person, right? And run away. It can also be misuse of iCards for powerful people or so-called powerful people. All those things are reduced, which is why we have transparency in toll collection. Then it has to do with accurate data collection. See, data is the new oil is a adage that everybody is aware of these days. When you have electronic toll collection, you can also immediately have the compiled data of what number of cars have passed through which toll point, where is there more congestion. It will help you in analytics and creating more, future forward sort of expectations and plannings of what, where, and when what should happen where and how. Right? So it will help you in accurate data collection. Then it also creates for seamless interstate travel, right? If all of the system is online, right? If it is an electronic system, so all of this interstate travel across different countries and perhaps different states, if it is across different countries, the driver does not have to carry denominations and currency from different countries. Right? If it has to do with multiple states that a car is, say, traversing through. Now, this portion is more significant for business travel. See, whenever you are writing such questions, we tend to think only from our life point of view, right? But think of it from the commercial aspect. Think of it from the point of view of logistics also. If you have that aspect in mind, please think of how a truck or perhaps any vehicle which is moving through different state boundaries, the calculation of taxes, the tolls is easier for the organization, for the driver, for the actual toll operators also, right? So it creates for seamless interstate travel. So I'm giving you how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points for a 10 marker question. Of course, you have to write around 4 to 5 good points here. If you're able to write 6, that's well and good. For people who are going to write the exam next year and are here just to gather content, for them, I want you to learn all 7. All right. So that was the advantages. Similarly, let's talk about the limitations. Limitations of electronic toll collection. First thing is, it has an initial costing for the users. You have to invest in the system first. You have to buy that tag. You have to put that prepaid balance in your account, right? And it can be inconvenient to some people. It can also be prohibitory. Just because someone can afford a car does not mean they can afford to put money in that account and let it stay there, right? So all of that residual fund is also something which is of concern. Inconvenience and prohibitive cost. First limitation. Second limitation is, whenever you're basing some sort of service on pre-existing services. So for electronic toll collection, we are basing it on the presupposition that we are going to have enough internet, we are going to have enough electricity to run this. Think of the reality of the roads of our country. On ground, there are a lot of highways and regions and roads and places where there's not going to be electrical connectivity all the time. If there's no electricity, how can you expect to have reliable internet all the time? Fair? So there are pockets of the country where these things are not available, which is why that connectivity is going to be intermittent. Intermittent means that it is going to be present in sometimes, not present in other times, which means that you will have to have redundant manpower also, which means that if in case there is no electricity, there is no connectivity, there has to be some person who has to be put there, which means it is too much cost, which means it is redundant. Fair? So that is the second limitation. Third limitation is lack of universal adoption. The benefits of such technology accrue to us only when everybody is doing it. If you have to see, if there is electronic toll collection only in 2 places in the entire pathway that you have to follow, then you have to do the RFID, FASTag investment, and you have to keep cash for the other thing also, which is why the overall output is not that helpful. So lack of universal adoption. Then there can also be fraud about data privacy, right? Because the continuous tracking of vehicles can happen because of the technology. From where to where has it moved? It can be that their security is put at risk, right? So that's why data privacy of this entire system is very, very significant. They can also be defrauded, right? The systems have to be so secure that they are impenetrable to such assaults. But till the time that they are, the limitation is that this can happen to them, right? Then you can have malfunctions and glitches. Just because you have the possibility of automating everything does not mean that there will not be problems there. There can be a glitch, there can be a malfunction, there can be a virus, there can be an attack, right? There can be investment in improving these systems also, right? So whatever maintenance is required, that will also require multiple investments. So which is why that is also a limitation. When this job has to be done by human, the only the input that is required is a person. When you automate, then it has to be ensured that it works properly all the time. Then you also have multiple tag providers, meaning that if you have too many tags and too many RFID systems, they may not operate with each other, right? There may be clashes. So what could be required for the driver is that they have multiple tags, which is going to be another problem. Fair? So these are the limitations of electronic toll collection. The arguments that I want you to include for sure: initial cost everybody can write, right? Lack of universal adoption, right? Malfunction and glitches. These problems everybody can write. I would expect a lot of you all to be able to write about connectivity issues also, right? If you're writing something more specific, which has to do with the angle and adjustment of the reader and the tags, they are also helpful. So this is what I was saying, that if I consider this to be the page that you're doing, you divide it into half and you should be able to write these points on 2 sides, right? Of course, different type of presentation styles are acceptable. You could have written it as a heading and points like this also. Then what are the proposed changes, right? The proposed changes to make it more seamless, more helpful, right? Let's talk about those points. See, there is a flow in the questions. When I said that these are the advantages and these are the disadvantages, there was a linkage here, right? The changes that you would want to, suggest have to do with eliminating these disadvantages. So if in the exam people tend to feel that you're not able to generate this content, all you have to do is look at the previous arguments that you've made and try and derive solutions for those. So for potential changes, proposed changes, you can transition to a GPS based tolling system. Why? It will ensure more, a seamless sort of tolling system. It can be more accurate also, and it can help us alleviate congestion at specific points. So think of it this way: if you're able to integrate GPS within the toll system, so you can have vehicle tracking and the tolling all together, and that opens up new avenues for further analytics. Then you need to have a wider network of electronic toll collection ka infrastructure, right? You have to ensure that every highway, every toll, all of these places are covered under the system, which is a change that we are proposing. The next is integration with digital payment ecosystems. If you do not have to fill in, you don't have to recharge your tag, if you don't have to sort of park your funds in that tag, if it can be directly linked to your wallet or your bank accounts, so that can also be helpful, right? Another change is we can have real-time monitoring and analytics. What this can do is that we can have advanced, say, integration of advanced technologies. You can have big data, you can have AI, because of which you can have things like dynamic pricing, you can have real-time analytics, you can have, what tools have to be shut down. So those signalings can help us have a stronger aspect. Then automated license plate recognition. If you're able to recognize the vehicle even better, have the license plate also, so you can even start, asking for whatever fines have to be taken out of that person's pocket, right? So those things can also help. Then we can have dynamic pricing, as I said, with real-time monitoring, or you can have dynamic pricing according to season, according to traffic, according to the the pathway that you want to push for that particular transit. Then you can also have zero toll highways. Zero toll highways means that we can also have the elimination of tolls altogether. Meaning, if the car does not have to stop to pay the toll, if it can be done directly while passing through that region, so even we will have more savings and less wasted time. Now, among these, the points that I would have wanted you to include: GPS, wider network, digital payment ecosystem, and one from the analytics point. These points people should be able to generate simply through background preparation. All right. See, in terms of this particular question, although the phrasing feels a little bit challenging, although it feels that they're asking a lot, which they are naturally, they're asking a lot of content. But in this present exam here, this topic of radio frequency tags, everything has been quite discussed upon, right? So this is not something that you would not know. If you felt a lot of inertia in writing that question, that has to do with answer writing practice, right? Content for this question you would have. Then potential hazards. Data privacy risks are there. System security issues. The entire system could be vulnerable to hacks. And that sort of thing is there whenever you have anything that goes online, right? Any sort of integration of technology, innovation of addition of electronics, or say, smart systems, they are always at risk for cyber attacks. Then deterrence of investment can delay adoption because it involves a lot of investment. It can be slower adoption of the technology. There can be system malfunctions which can create further problems. If the entire system malfunctions, then of course we will have a much larger congestion, much larger problem of traffic at hand. Then there is also the issue of digital exclusion. Till the time there are some people who are lacking or are separated from the benefits of digitalization, that exclusion is going to be an issue. Then there is also that potential job loss that is there in a country where we have to find ways of generating more employment. Creating more electronic systems, automated systems, is going to put people out of a job, right? So that is a concern. And there is also the risk of increased vehicle tracking and surveillance, right? So it could be an aspect of a surveillance state where the movement of the vehicles can easily be tracked. It can create other problems to do with rights and freedoms. Fair. So this was the content that we are going to write here. Of course, this also you can put in a tabular format. Either of these you could. Now, for a smart candidate, for somebody who's trying to maximize their marks, what you do is that you choose the presentation which allows you to sort of showcase your knowledge to the best. Meaning, if you had more content for advantages and limitations, I would in terms of having a strong strategy, if you had more content for say advantage and limitation, then I would pick this presentation style, where what I know is being put in a separate paragraph, what I don't know is in a table. If I know for sure what the proposed changes are and what the associated hazards might be, for that I would put the first part of the question in a table, right? So it's not just what content you're writing, it's not just what presentation you're selecting. It has to do with a mix of what your strategy is within the exam. All right, let's move on to the next question. So we are moving to 15 markers now, and here there are certain other considerations that we have to have. Fair? Let's look at question number 15. For question number 15, the question is that the world is facing an acute shortage of clean and safe fresh water. The first thing here is that this statement is not something that should be a cause of alarm, right? Water shortage in the country is a PYQ that has been asked, is a question that UPSC has asked before, right? So this is something that we tend to prepare anyway. For this, you will have some data also. So for water shortage in the world, I do have data. I should have prepared some reference to reports. I may even have the world map. So when you're looking at the question, you have to see what the opportunities might be and what you can write in the content. Now, whether or not you're going to make it in the exam is a different story, but your reaction has to be, can you identify the things that you know here? Okay? Now, the other thing is, this statement is not a question. This is a thesis statement. This is just setting the stage for what has to be asked. What is the question? What are the alternative technologies which can be used to solve the crisis? When they're asking you this question, what are the alternative technologies? This what means that they're asking for a list, right? They're asking for a list of what has to be a technology which could be used. Fair? Then they're not asking for conventional technologies. They're asking for alternative technologies, which means that I'm not asking about filtration and desalination and reverse osmosis. We are asking about alternative technologies here. So the psychology of the question is that I am breadcrumbing. I'm giving you a hint about something that you know for sure. You see that yes, there is shortage of water, safe, clean, safe water in the world. I have data, report, everything I've prepared. Then you are going to be happy. You are going to be excited. You are going to start reading the question quickly. What are the technologies which can solve the crisis? If you only read what are technologies, you are going to write conventional technologies. The key point here, the key word here becomes alternative technologies. This is what we have to ensure that we are answering. Fair? Then briefly discuss any 3 such technologies, citing their merits and demerits, which means that in the 3 pages that I have to talk about technology 1, technology 2, technology 3, right, of the solution. They're asking for the discussion, right, merits and demerits. Right? 3 elements for each technology I have to cover, which means it is imperative that you identify the correct technologies. Do we understand this? So it is to do with the process and the analysis. Discuss means that you describe the process, right? And merits and demerits have to do with the analysis of that particular technology. So all of this is hinging upon you identifying the core demand that it was alternative technology. I won't say this is a very tough question. Tough is because of the content, and that I'll talk about later. But the question phrasing itself is tricky. If you miss out on one word, if your comprehension is slow in this particular aspect, then this question will become lost, right? So this is something that we have to be careful about. Now let's talk about content. For the introduction, you write data for the freshwater crisis. You can talk about UNESCO's World Water Development Gap Report, right? So there is World Water Development Report about what are the areas under water stress and how it's growing. Then it has also said that water crisis is threatening world peace at this situation, because it was the report in the exam year. I would expect you to know this data. Of course, in conclusion, I have SDG number 6, clean water, safe sanitation for all, clean and safe water and sanitation for all. You can also talk about how, because of all these problems, we need to have innovation and government support stewardship for this. Fair? Now, let's talk about the question analysis. For solving the problem of freshwater crisis, there are conventional technologies that are available. There are alternative technologies. Conventional technologies means that there are filtration technologies. So sand filter, activated carbon filter, all these things, filtration technology. Another thing for, reducing this freshwater crisis, we tend to say things like reduce, reuse, recycle. We tend to talk about rainwater harvesting. Right? What else? We have reverse osmosis systems. RO systems. All of these are conventional technologies. This was not where the demand of the question was. The demand of the question is here. This demand is not these technologies. This you cannot write in this answer. This we have to be sure. All right. Then, what are the technologies that we do have to write about now? This is the position where I feel that students would have found themselves to be stumped. Now you have to think, acha, what am I supposed to write here? Whenever you are in this situation, in your MGP, what we've taught you is, you try and use the syllabus to generate the point. Right? For you to find those alternative technologies, you have to run through the syllabus points in your head. So, in the new technologies, fresh technologies, innovative technologies that we study in your science and tech syllabus, you study nanotechnology. This much though you study for sure for prelims, mains, both. You study biotechnology as a topic, right? You also study cloud seeding. Cloud seeding you would have studied in environmental technology portions. So these three you would know for sure, which is why these are the ones that you could have written. Fair? Other than that, there are certain innovative things which you could have come across in articles. There is iceberg harvesting, that because the icebergs are already melting, they are already breaking off from the polar ice caps, we can capture those icebergs from the oceans and we can use that, take them to places of water scarcity. Other than that, other points you could generate were that, okay, see, it could be that, that yes, filtration you cannot write, it is a conventional technology, but new developments in filtration, photocatalysis, or perhaps new type of ceramics, new types of filtration systems that are being developed, that you can write. If desalination is a conventional technology, reverse osmosis we know, but its conjunction with forward osmosis systems, if you're aware of this, this could also be included, right? Certain micro irrigation techniques for maximizing the amount of water which is available, reducing agriculture consumption. This is also something that you could have written. But stronger ones could be the ones that you're generating through the syllabus. Fair? Now, let's talk about the first technology we're discussing today here. Of course, see, I told you all those options are there. You can pick which ones, but I'm talking about the ones which are probable and which you could have written. So my first selection is nanotechnology based water treatment systems. So you can have nanomembranes, you can use nanotubes and create acoustic addition. You can also create nano adsorption polymers. What I'm saying here is nanotechnology can be used to make the membrane through which water filtration is happening. You can also use carbon nanotubes, which are specifically designed for certain types of filtration processes. Then you can also create specific adsorption polymers. You can create, the sort of filtration or, adsorption this thing aggregate which is going to adsorb onto its surface. Absorb is going inside, adsorb is on the surface, adsorb certain pollutants. So these when you're discussing the technology, what you can describe is the process through which that water treatment can happen, right? So to solve this crisis, this is what we can do. We can filter the impure water is what I'm saying, right? Another aspect of the process is why nanotechnology is suitable for this filtration process. It is because it can remove pollutants, heavy metals and pathogens, all three, right? Something that has been added, something that has been leached, something which has biological activity. It has high adsorption efficiency. So adsorption polymer is the technology. This is the type of material which is being used. This high adsorption efficiency is the characteristic of the material. You could have written either. Then stability and longevity. This particular type of material has long-term availability. It is being able, you can create stable elements through which this filtration can take place. Then merits and demerits. The merits of nanotech is it will have effective filtration, right? It can effectively filter out the specific contaminants you want to remove. Even the smallest contaminants you want to remove, they can be removed. So even viruses can be filtered out because it can be a particle size which is being filtered. So it is an effective process. It is also energy efficient. Why? Because this process does not necessarily need expenditure of energy to filter. So reverse osmosis, the process is that you have semi-permeable membrane and against the flow of osmosis, we have to apply pressure. So for that pressure, some amount of energy has to be expended. Here what is happening is, because you're preparing a specific type of filter, that energy may not be needed, which is why it can be energy efficient, right? Then it can have targeted pollutant removal. If you know that in that source of water there is a specific type of pollutant which is there, the nano tube, the nano filter can be designed according to the pollutant, right? Because the system can be designed according to the problem, you can have a very efficient process. Fair. It also has desalination potential, meaning it is not just for treatment of wastewater, it can also be used to make seawater potable. Then scalability, because once the nanotechnology ka system has been created, once it has been identified that this is what we need, it can be scaled to large scale applications also. It can be used in both small portable filters, it can be used in large systems also, which is why the same technology can work in both aspects. Then it can be sustainable. Why? Because it will reduce the chemical use which is there. Usually in making water, from going hard water to soft water, there are chemicals that are added. Sometimes for disinfection also chemicals might be added. But eventually the problem is that those chemicals are going to accumulate in the environment. Whereas the nanotechnology filters, they will not add something to the environment as such, right? So there's no chemical that is being added, which is why it can be sustainable. It can also have high throughput. Large volumes of water can be filtered here if the system is so designed. Right? So these are the merits. Fair. Then for demerits, what you're going to write is, in the initial stages, it is going to be very, very expensive. Developing the technology is going to have very high cost. Then we don't know the long-term environmental impact. In the short term, I know that yes, it's not adding any chemicals, right? But in the long term, I don't know how nanotubes are going to degenerate. I don't know whether or not it's going to, accumulate. Nanotubes themselves are going to accumulate in the environment. We don't know about that, which is why the long-term environmental impact is unknown. Then there is the challenge of regulation and standardization. Among different countries, we have to have a standard which has to be followed, right? We have to ensure that that is happening. Otherwise, the interoperability of water systems also are going to be a problem, right? Then operational costs can be also very high. If development of that system is very high, is very expensive, then the replacement parts, the maintenance, all those things are also proportionally expensive, which is why it could turn out to be a not so cost-effective solution. Fair. See, whenever you're talking about merits and demerits of a particular technology, it is not as if you need to have a consensus that comes out. You don't need to have like a final solution. No, these are alternative technologies, and it is well understood that we are not sure about what the outcome is, whether or not it is a completely positive or a completely negative, application which is there. Fair. The next one that I'm talking about, the next technology, remember you were asked to write 3. This is the second one. First was nano, second is cloud. So for cloud seeding, so let us describe the process. It is a weather modification technique because in which salts like silver iodide, potassium iodide and salt, common salt, sodium chloride, are dispersed in the cloud to stimulate rainfall. We are creating rainfall by seeding the cloud with certain ions, certain salts. It is then whatever rainfall is happening, that can be used to harvest the rainwater. So it will address scarcity by generating rainfall in rain deficient areas. What are the merits? First is rainfall will directly alleviate scarcity only. If there is rainfall, we have enough water, problem solved. Then it will support agriculture. When there is rainfall, it is going to not just be used for the direct consumption of by people, but it can also support agriculture. Then it will help us replenish reservoirs, the rivers, the lakes, everything is going to get filled up with water. So there will be longevity in the availability. It will be ecologically inclusive. What I mean is that ecologically, it is not just for the benefits of humans, but flora and fauna. All 3 aspects are going to gain water, which means that it is going to create benefits for the entire ecosystem and not just people. If I'm doing carbon nanofiltration, that water is only being used by humans, right? But by cloud seeding, that water can be used. It can be helpful to all elements of the ecosystem. Then there is scalable technology. Naturally, it is for a large region that it can be utilized. Cloud seeding can also happen for a particular region. So you get to have those options. It also has added benefits. Things like it reduces air pollution. It will reduce the suspended particulate matter which is there in the air, right? So air quality can also improve, and it can also be used to help combat wildfires, right? So forest fires, wildfires, those things can also be addressed with this technology. Fair? So these are the merits. Demerits are, it is unpredictable and it can have uncertain results. Just because you are sprinkling the salt does not mean that rainfall is going to occur. It does not mean that rainfall is going to occur specifically in the place that you wanted. It cannot be that rainfall is occurring in the right time that you wanted. So it is difficult to ascertain whether or not it will happen according to the needs, the rainfall. Second point is that there is the risk of pollution and accumulation of chemicals. Although I'm saying it will reduce air pollution, the salts that I'm using, the chemicals that I'm using to seed the cloud, to create the rainfall, that itself can create pollution and bioaccumulation, environmental accumulation in the long run. Then it is also ineffective without cloud cover. If there is no cloud only, where will the rainfall come from? It relies upon the fact that there have to be clouds in the atmosphere. If it's a clear day, if it is an arid region, there will not be any cloud seeding which is possible. Then there is also equity issues. It can create inequity. Why? Because it can divert rainfall from one region to another. If that cloud, see, if this was the region, this is rain deficient region, and the cloud was here, but the cloud was not prepared to give the rainfall. This cloud was going to a different region, and here that rainfall was going to happen, right? If I'm doing cloud seeding here, it will create a different rain deficient area over here. These people are deprived of the rainfall, which means it can be a precursor to fights over people, alleging that certain regions have stolen our rainfall. That could also be a concern, which is why we have to identify the issue of inequity. Then it is a temporary solution. Just because you're able to create rain in one region does not mean that you're addressing the issues of wastage of water, pollution of water, the scarcity, year-long scarcity of water. It is only a temporary solution. It will only act as a band-aid for the current scenario, right? The third technology that I could propose as an alternative technology would be iceberg harvesting. Now, this is the sort of thing that you may have come across in a magazine or not, and a lot of people might not be aware. It is also considered to be a quirky sort of technology because it does not, it's not a directly, innovative. I mean, it's not a very technology forward solution. It's just that the icebergs are breaking and we can take it to a different place. The technology aspect of it is the fact that our logistics can be now strong enough. So the development is not for iceberg, but for harvesting. So it is a harvesting technology, how and where we can use the water. So it involves towing and melting icebergs, right, from polar regions to areas of shortage, and it is essentially a method of resource redistribution. Please keep in mind the keywords that I'm giving you, they are helpful in embellishing your content. It makes for a stronger answer. Then, what are the merits? Icebergs are sources of abundant fresh water. There is so much icebergs that are there. They're melting also, they're breaking off also. And right now, we are not treating it as a resource. Then, it is a natural and renewable resource. So, icebergs are available naturally. I'm not tampering with it. And it is renewable. Essentially, it was expected that icebergs are going to form again. So, that is the sort of thing which is there. Of course, this point that it is a renewable resource has been misused to exploit a lot of the environment already. So, that could be a concern. Well, there is minimal processing that is required. It is already fresh water, it is already clean water. So, it doesn't have to be processed as much. It is also resilient to seasons and droughts. Irrespective of whatever is happening in the rest of the part of the globe, the polar ice caps are always there, which means no matter how much water scarcity is going on, the polar ice caps are at least going to be there for the foreseeable future. So, they are more all year-round availability. Fair. Then, high cost. What are the demerits? The cost of logistics is very, very high, right? For just to, bring that piece of iceberg to an area of water deficiency, you will have to have cooling systems. You have to expend fuel, water, energy, cost in transporting the iceberg. So that's why high cost of logistics. Then there will be melting loss in transit. The polar ice caps are cold regions. When you're bringing that ice to an area of scarcity, that ice is going to melt. It is going to get, there will be certain losses, right? They are going to be there. Associated with this could also be that utilizing this aspect, utilizing icebergs could also lead to the, release of more methane and other trapped gases to marine and polar ecology, which is at the source, as well as to destination ecology. If you're bringing in icebergs, it can affect the temperature of the water which is there in the destination place. It is going to affect the microfauna which is there, right? And of course, in the source region, you are taking away places where the flora and fauna for the polar regions live and thrive. It has limited accessibility. From the poles, I could expect to take the icebergs to a certain region also. Bringing it to equatorial region feels that it is too far away, right? It could also be so expensive that it's not going to go to all the regions which are possible, right? Then there can be geopolitical complications. Areas, the countries of the polar region could say that the other regions are stealing their water, right? That could be an issue. It can get embroiled in multiple geopolitical complications. So there have to be approvals and diplomatic associations which have to be formed, and only then this technology could be feasible. All right. So this is the aspect of what you had to write for this question about alternative technologies for this thing, water scarcity. All right. The last question from science is that what are asteroids? How real is the threat of them causing extinction of life? And what strategies have been developed to prevent such a catastrophe? Let's break the question down. What are asteroids? Demand number 1. Very clear, right? It is a direct question. Whenever there is a direct question, it has to click in your mind. What is the content that I know? Do I know the definition of asteroids? Can I make some sort of diagram? The answer is yes, I can make the diagram of solar system in which I can say that yes, this is the asteroid belt. That is something that I'm sure of. Then second part of the question is, How real is the threat of them causing extinction of life? How real means they're asking for your opinion, right? This is the opinion part in which you have to give a balanced opinion, right? They're essentially asking you, is it a real threat or is it a fictional threat? How real is it, right? Extinction of life. For life, my interpretation is, are they talking about all life on earth, like extinction level event for the entire life form, or are they talking about specific species, right? Are they talking about the immediate aspect or long-term aspect? So these issues are there in the particular question. Then third part is, what strategies have been adopted to prevent such a catastrophe? This is the third part of the question. 3 pages, 3 parts of the question, very clear breakdown of spacing. Where what is the introduction? Whenever the question is a what is question, a describe the topic question, your introduction has to be linked to the answer itself. The first paragraph of my body is going to be define and describe asteroids. Whenever there is such a description required in geography or science, the definition has to be clear and precise. So what are the things that we keep track of here? We have to describe what the asteroid is, what is it's consisted of. So it is a small size, rocky, and it is an object that orbits the sun, right? That is the definition of the asteroid. It is largely found between Mars and Jupiter. Then the size can range from a few meters to hundreds of kilometers. Naturally, for people who have more specific information, you could have written that it can range from size of 1 meter to around 500 meters or kilometers also, right? Genesis. It is formed from the remnants from the formation of solar system, right? So while the solar system was being formed, this is the part of the type, the genesis of the asteroid. You can include the diagram also. Here a figure could be included, which is location of the asteroid belt. I'm making the sun, the orbits of Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars, and then you have the asteroid belt, right? So between Jupiter, that is what you mark. Then threat of asteroid causing extinction. First, let's talk about the thought process. When you have to analyze whether or not it's a real threat or not, right? What are the aspects that we can talk about? Has it happened before, right? For you to find the veracity of the statement, for you to check whether it is real or not, first you have to see whether or not it is possible. For possible, it has happened once before. Dinosaurs went extinct because of an asteroid explosion. So there is precedence for that. Then there is the likelihood. How possible is it? How probable is it that something like that could happen, right? Then what is the scale for which we require it to happen? Does it have to be a small asteroid, large asteroid, and associated likelihood? Then whatever is the recent discoveries, the current perspective of whether or not asteroid collision is an impending, a probable or impending event, right? That is the aspect that has to happen cerebrally. This is what you have to think to be able to analyze the situation. What is the threat of asteroids causing extinction? First thing is, you have to write that it is a real threat, but it is a rare event. Although it is real, it is not highly probable. Dinosaur extinction happened 66 million years ago because of an asteroid implosion. You could talk about the period, right? If you are from an optional in which you happen to have learnt the Jurassic, Triassic periods and so on and so forth, you can write the period, you can write the era, you can write the time period, right? How many years ago? Then we are also saying that if it is a large asteroid, they can trigger catastrophic events, right? They can have catastrophic impacts. What happens is that they can trigger tsunamis, earthquakes and climate change, and that can create the threat of extinction, right? So it can be a direct cause, it can be an indirect cause is what I'm saying, right? So it can be a direct cause of extinction, it can be indirect, right? Then what is the risk assessment? Risk assessment is only certain asteroids that are going to come close to Earth are the ones which are going to be threatening. So only near Earth objects called NEO are hazardous, and they are classified as potentially hazardous asteroids, right? So they are called PHAs. Now, this information you may or may not be having, but this fact is easy enough for us to generate. Then the next part is strategies to prevent catastrophe, right? First thing is we have to have early detection systems. Early detection systems may we have to have surveillance by space agencies. Space agencies like NASA are having surveillance systems. They are tracking what asteroid is going where. They are naming those asteroids. It's called Planetary Defense Coordination Office. Then we have observation and imaging facilities. So we have the possibility of looking at different asteroids. We are constantly looking at the space, and we are identifying what is happening, what is not. So VC Rubin Observatory could be an example here. Naturally, you can write the name of any observatory you're thinking of which is focused on planetary objects. So it has to do with early detection. Then you have deflection strategies. When you see that an asteroid is coming towards the Earth, then what is it that we can do? We can have kinetic impact, which is NASA's DART mission. We can have something, a missile or a different spacecraft that goes and hits the asteroid. So if this is the Earth and the asteroid is coming towards the Earth, Earth can respond by sending an object to go and hit on the asteroid and break it apart. So kinetic impact. Then it can be gravity tractor, which is that if the asteroid is coming towards the Earth, we send a spacecraft on top of this, and this eventually just brings it into the orbit of the Earth. It can stay in orbit or it can be made to land on the Earth, right? So gravity tractor can be sort of bind it to Earth's gravitational orbit. Then it can also be nuclear explosion. If this is the Earth and there is an asteroid that is close to us, we can send a nuclear bomb, explode the asteroid, and then that's over for us, right? So it can be something of how we are going to deflect the asteroid from coming and attacking the Earth. Then it also has to do with, one of the strategies has to do with international collaboration and policies. So international collaboration has to do with that you have to have an international asteroid warning network. If one country identifies there is an impending asteroid, they have to tell the other countries. So we have the warning network. There is also cooperation of agencies. For example, NASA made the DART mission, but the European Union is selling the HERA to follow DART, right? Then you also have planetary defense conferences, right? To augment, to plan for what has to happen for the improvement of the situation. So these are the aspects of the question. In conclusion, what is it? That it is, your conclusion is your opinion, that do you think it is a real threat or not? So it is a real threat, but improbable. It happens very rarely. We are well within the preparation to be able to identify such an asteroid. You can talk about the current affairs linkage, which is that such an asteroid is also coming into the orbit of the Earth close to the moon. We are calling it the second moon. That sort of thing you can include here. You can also write a way forward based conclusion that planetary defense and international cooperation are needed to address such planetary challenges, threats, right? So among science and tech, what questions are easy, what are difficult? See, for asteroid, you could have used your prelims knowledge, right? So for this asteroid question, prelims knowledge is enough for us to have confidence, right? This can be written from prelims, so this is a doable question. The thing with the question on life, water scarcity, this is tricky because you have to identify the correct interpretation. So I'll call this a tricky question, right? And here you have to be able to identify the technologies. It is there, but the mental steps are a little bit longer. Then for the question of electronic toll collection, this is a question which is doable. The only challenge is that too many questions are asked. So this is an exercise of restraint, time management for this question, right? And for trips, of course, this is an expected question that you should be able to write. Fair. So in terms of the assessment, this was a doable paper from science and tech ka point of view. People from MGP have been, the inputs that I've received from students is they've been able to write the answers. Of course, there is a lot of, discourse of what is the ideal content. I hope that the discussion helps you in that regard. That's all from me today. Thank you.
Okay, so let us see this year's GS3 core economy questions of GS3 paper. Okay, first see this question. Examine the pattern and trend of public expenditure on social services in the post-reform period in India. To what extent this has been in consonance with achieving the objective of inclusive growth. So basically a question analyzing or asking you to analyze the pattern of public expenditure on social services in post-reform period. So in post-reform period, what you have seen, that means the period after 1991. And there, you can just look at the period after it in two parts. For example, you know that from 1990 to 1992, you had this period of plan holiday. And then from 1992 to 97, then 2002, then 2007. This is the period of 8th 5-year plan. This is 9th 5-year plan. And then 10th 5-year plan. Now, in 8th 5-year plan and 9th 5-year plan, basically the focus was on LPG reforms. Okay, so for example, if you just look at it, the focus area of 8th 5-year plan, this was growth with human face. Although basic agenda was to actualize this LPG reform that were decided, or you can say that became the policy reflected in the new economic policy based on Rao Manmohan model. So that was there in 8th 5-year plan, and then that also continued in the 9th 5-year plan. And then from 11th 5-year plan onwards, you see a special or exclusive focus on inclusive growth. But yes, growth, it was tried to make it more broad-based from this period or this phase onwards. Okay, so basically, the social services becomes a focus from 2004-5 onwards, or especially after 2005. Okay, so from that point onwards, you see that there has been stress on employment generation, MG Narega, then right to health, right to education, then National Rural Health Mission. All that is becoming the focus area of the government. Okay. So basically, after 2005, that means you can just look at it from this period onwards, that is somewhere mid of the 10th 5-year plan, then 11th 5-year plan का जो time period था, 2007 to 2012. This has been very much in the agenda. And if you just consider another time period, that is from the year 2010 to 2020, this is also the time period where you have seen the stress on expenditure, stress on social service area. So public health, education, employment generation, all that becomes the focus area from 2005 onwards. Okay. Now, its impact on inclusive growth, again, if you look at this time period, 1992 to 1997 to 2002, you do not see much emphasis on inclusive growth. And it is actually that aspect of growth which ignored the inclusivity, which is resulted into large scale inequality. And that is why inclusive growth will become a focus area after this time period. Okay. Whether the expenditure after 2005 has been in consonance with the objective of inclusive growth or not, after 2005 you see that yes, after there has been a stress, let us say there was a stress on increasing the education expenditure as 6% of GDP, health expenditure also increasing it to a target whereby we could serve the population, especially with respect to the primary and secondary healthcare. So all that started bringing the results from 2006-7 onwards. And you have seen that there has also been emphasis on making people access public health care. After that, you have seen from this period onwards, in the mid of this decade, you have seen explicit efforts by the government to ensure to provide health coverage or insurance coverage to the population. Also, the enrollment ratio increased. There has been emphasis on pensions, social security schemes for unorganized sector. So all that actually started bringing about certain results from this period onwards. Okay, but in the initial 1.5 decade after the reforms, there has been exclusive focus on actually implementing the LPG policy, and the objective of inclusive growth, the objective of bringing at least a minimal level of equality, that objective has been ignored. Okay, so the trend of public expenditure for social services is started getting or is showing results after 2005-6. Okay, before that, the exclusive focus has been on implementing this new economic policy. So this has been the major trend or the pattern of public expenditure on social services. Okay, you needed to provide this sketch by including the schemes that were introduced in this period. Okay, so for example, for employment generation, for health, for education, sometimes many of the initiatives were backed by legislation also. Okay, so that also you needed to show. Otherwise, it was not a very difficult question. What was required in this particular answer was to divide this post-reform period into two parts. First part of the period focused on realizing the LPG reforms. Okay, because initially you say that when we went for this external assistance, BOP assistance to IMF, then the conditions were imposed, and you know that macroeconomic stabilization program was there, a structural adjustment program was there. Okay, so for example, macroeconomic stabilization program necessitated the state to decrease its expenditure. So decrease in public expenditure was a very direct outcome of implementation of LPG policy. Okay, so that decrease in expenditure manifested decrease in the public expenditure of social services also. Okay, so there in that phase, inequality actually increased. And that is why only in 11th five-year plan, inclusive growth will become a focus area. And that is why I say that somewhere from 2005-6 onwards, you see the focus in this part, in this area. So that kind of understanding you needed to reflect on this particular question. Okay, now just see this question. What are the causes of persistent high food inflation in India? Comment on the effectiveness of monetary policy of RBI to control this type of inflation. So basically a question on the factors responsible for high food inflation in India. Okay, and there the second part is also somewhat conceptual. Okay, that requires the understanding of monetary policy. So food inflation की क्या वजह हो सकती हैं? What are the factors? So basically, it will firstly be concerned about the supply chain management or supply side factors. Okay, the agriculture marketing, issues in agriculture marketing. There you have issues, for example, excessive intermediation. Eating of the share of farmer in the ultimate price of their produce. Then infrastructural issues. Okay, you have also seen the issues of high input cost. Okay, for example, seeds, fertilizers, and many other inputs. Then you can also include global or international prices in international market. So global factors में हो जाएगा prices in international market. When it comes to procurement by the government, you can include that point also, that there has been delayed procurement, and then delayed procurement resulting into delayed delivery, ultimately creating the shortage and increasing the prices of food. Okay, then there are problems with respect to the vagaries of environment. And climate change. So these are the factors that have led to high food inflation in India. The second part you needed to answer, where it is about the effectiveness of monetary policy. So just look at what monetary policy is all about. Monetary policy है क्या? So monetary policy है क्या? That component of economic policy through which RBI controls the flow of money in the economy. Okay, controls the flow of money, credit, money supply. If you consider the objectives, so the objectives would include the economic growth, employment generation, financial sector stability, exchange rate stability. And monetary policy tools, when they are used to control inflation, how typically that happens. So for example, our RBI can just go for LA of liquidity adjustment facility. Let us say the example of repo rate here. If it increases, then credit creation capacity of the bank goes down. Okay, money multiplier goes down, MS comes down, aggregate demand comes down, and thus inflation comes down. Okay. Typically, how it happens that when monetary policy is used to control inflation, it basically affects the aggregate demand in the economy. Okay, by bringing down the aggregate demand, inflation is controlled. But that is an effective tool of containing the inflation if inflation is caused by demand side factors. Okay, so monetary policy is very effective in containing the demand pull inflation. But you just saw that food inflation is basically because of supply side factors. Okay, so supply side factors are difficult to control, and monetary policy is not going to have any direct impact over supply side factors. Many times monetary policy, a contractionary here, this is the example of contractionary monetary policy. So contractionary or hawkish monetary policy can actually be counterproductive for businesses. Okay, it will be raising the cost of doing business, and in that case it can actually complicate the situation. In case of agriculture, that is not going to solve the problem of supply side factors at all. And that is why, because the inflation in food is mainly induced by supply side factors, contractionary monetary policy is not going to deliver much. It is not going to be quite helpful or very helpful. Okay, another side of monetary policy, if you see, that controls the money supply in the economy, and in that case it actually gets related with exchange rate. So there you can have another view. So for example, if rupee is very strong, okay, vis-a-vis other currencies, vis-a-vis, let us say, dollar, then in that case import will be cheaper. Yes, import would be cheaper, but only that component of agri-produce or food would be cheaper which are imported. So a stronger rupee in that case would help in bringing down the imported cost of food. Imported cost of food. But if you talk about food inflation in general, again, that is not going to be of much help, because it will just be having an effect on those food items which are imported. And high food inflation in India has not been mainly imported inflation. That has also not been the case. So in that case, monetary policy as such is not going to be very helpful in containing food inflation. Okay, so that is the conclusion that you needed to draw in this question. Okay, otherwise I don't think that, again, this is not a difficult question. Mains anyway is not very difficult when you prepare things properly. Okay, now see this question. What are the factors responsible for the successful implementation of land reforms in some parts of the country? Elaborate. Okay, the question itself admits that successful implementation of land reforms in some part of the country. The general understanding that you have of land reforms is that it has not been successful on pan-Indian level. But yes, there has been some success on some aspects of land reforms in some areas, in some pockets. Okay, so land reforms, if you look at land reforms, they were introduced with this objective of increasing the agri productivity and also bringing equity. These were the twofold objectives of land reforms. If you look at the measures taken in this regard, the measures were abolition of intermediaries, that was the first one of the measures. Then ceiling on land holding, consolidation, tenancy reforms, cooperative farming, and then updation of land records. These are the measures that were taken under land reforms. If you look at the abolition of intermediaries, this has been the case in many of the states' abolition act, in many of the state government. Jammu and Kashmir is an example. Okay, and elsewhere. So good success in this regard. There has been the abolition of intermediaries. Okay, for example, Jamidari system, Rayatwari system, Mahalwari system. Ceiling on land holdings, that has been again a success in Jammu and Kashmir region, in other parts of the country whereby abolition of intermediaries has been practiced quite effectively. Consolidation has happened in areas like Maharashtra, okay, where there was proper legal framework to support this. You have seen good tenancy reforms in West Bengal region. You know that Operation Barga was launched here. Operation Barga. The whole administrative machinery was channelized to bring about these kind of reforms. Cooperative farming as a whole has not been quite successful. If you have a good understanding of it, you would recall that this is something which has been misused by big farmers. Updation of land record has been successful, but has been implemented quite late. But the question was, what were the factors responsible for successful implementation? Okay, so factors responsible for successful implementation are actually the factors responsible for the failure also. So for example, tenancy reforms, consolidate or ceiling on land holding, and these two have been a failure at pan-Indian level because of lack of political will. But in some areas, you have seen that political will was there. Okay, so successful implementation in Kerala, in West Bengal, has been because of political will. Okay, another factor that is responsible for proper implementation in this part of the country was that there was significant social pressure. Okay, because of the societal or because of the civil society movements, for example, in Kerala, in favor of land reforms. Social pressure was also because of certain movements that happened just before independence. For example, Telangana region witnessed those kind of movements in 1940s. Okay, peasant movements. Okay, there has also been proper legal framework supporting the legislations which have been framed on the basis of guidelines suggested by the central government. That we have seen happening in Maharashtra. Okay, cooperatives have been successful in some areas where state governments provided again very robust legal framework, and also the whole administrative machinery was channelized to facilitate these cooperatives, the formation of these cooperatives. So this has been successful in Gujarat region. Updation of land record has been successful. Okay, with some pockets still facing issues. For example, Bihar, where it started only recently. Otherwise, at pan-Indian level, that has been a success, but the success has come quite late. Okay, so this has been the case with land reforms in India. Okay, the factors responsible for land reforms. So basically, it's about legal framework, social pressure, civil society movements, political will, and all that. Okay, so these are the factors. Then you needed to talk about different parts of the country where those measures have been successful. Explain the role of millets for ensuring health and nutritional security in India. Okay, so direct question hai, and this was very much expected question also. Okay, as you have seen, Sri and other initiatives by the government trying to promote millets or millet cultivation. So here you needed to explain the role of millets in health and nutritional security. तो मिलेट्स का कई तरीके से आप इसको दिखा सकते हो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, न्यूट्रिशन प्रोफाइल is very rich. Okay, here they have high protein, then micronutrients, okay, you can also see that low glycemic index, that means slow release of sugar, so very much helpful for management of diseases like diabetes, gluten free. Okay, micronutrients mein zinc, iron and all that is quite high fiber content. Okay, apart from that, low cost, so you can say that these are very cost effective. Then drought resistant, okay, so climate resilience वाला जो एंगल है वो इसमें शामिल है. Climate resilience, okay, then part of local cuisine. तो social dimension जो है इसका, ये environmental dimension है. So you needed to show its health benefits and also needed to show that how cultivation of millet is quite cost effective. Okay, and this has been one of the flaw in agriculture price policy, that the people growing millets have been incentivized to grow other crops over millets, and that is why government needed to bring about certain changes in the agriculture price policy, because of this skewed cropping pattern that was the result of wrong agriculture price policy. to bring about that change whereby the people growing millets in a particular region are incentivized to grow, because apart from the health benefits, this is actually something which is also ensuring food security in India. Okay, so there is an economic side of it, then there is social and environmental. You needed to show all that to ensure, to show that how they actually ensure the health and nutritional security in India. Okay, you needed to talk about the cropping pattern also, that how wrong agriculture policy can induce wrong cropping pattern. That means growing of crops regardless of the agroclimatic realities, and how millets are actually have been facing that problem because of that wrong policy, and how the government is incentivizing again to bring about that correction in the cropping pattern. Okay, and also promoting the millets, considering their potential in delivering food and nutritional security. Okay, so this is the side, this is the framework that you needed to adopt in answering this question. Okay, now coming to another question. Discuss the merits and demerits of 4 labor codes in context of labor market reforms in India. What has been the progress so far in this regard? Okay. So, merits and demerits of 4 labor codes. 4 labor codes that were codified in the year 2019 and 20 were actually the result of codification, or you can say replacing 44 labor laws, converting them into 4 codes, and then we have to analyze the merits and demerits. Okay, just keep those 4 labor codes aside. Look what has been the case before the codification. So we started in 2019. Okay, by 2020 we had 4 labor codes. Before that, you have seen that Indian economy has been facing very important, or you can say very crucial challenge, that is the challenge of informalization. So informalization of the labor force was a major problem in Indian economy, and it was crucial in the sense that if you analyze the data by NSSO, PLFS surveys, then the problem was actually even worse, because organized sector in India was generating more informal jobs than formal jobs. Okay, and the situation gets complicated when you see the rise of gig workforce in India. Okay, so that has been the case in India. And now see, if you look at the factor responsible for this informalization of labor force in India, mainly this has been rigid labor laws, and rigid hiring and firing policies. Hiring and firing policies. Rigid labor laws actually also disincentivize, or you can say demoted companies to keep the labor on formal basis, because then they have to meet so many requirements. So 4 labor codes की merit तो ये साफ साफ हो जाती है. One clear merit is this, that it actually streamlines the whole compliance process, whereby the employer and employee both know what has to be done, both know what governments wants through these legislation. Okay, there are just 4 codes and then everything is streamlined there. It also facilitates the process of both hiring and firing. So in that case, it actually also enhances the ease of doing business. Okay, the 4 labor codes also stresses on social security aspect. So in that case, there has been the special provision for contract employment, and thus the contract employment, which has been formerly classified as informal, now is part of formal. Okay, because of these 4 labor codes, and in that case, that is going to further promote the formalization of the economy. Okay, so it promotes in formalization of the economy. It promotes ease of doing business. It streamlines the process whereby companies, and that means the employer and employees, both know what is the process and what are the conditions there. Then four labor codes has been one important factor that has been responsible for the rise of Singapore is simplification of labor laws. Your Make in India program has been launched, which takes inspiration from Singapore model. Okay, so the ease of doing business component should not be understated here. So that is also one very important merit that you can cite here. Okay, then as I said, that the gig workforce in India is on the rise, and then in that case, those platform workers, which would formerly be classified maybe as unorganized or informal, are also taken into account as it recognizes this. Okay, but demerits are also there because it has been pointed out that the unions have lost their levers as they used to have with respect to this bargaining power for the rights of the labor. Okay, it has been said that they are not having that kind of bargaining chips now as they used to have before these labor codes and the previous system. Okay, it has also been pointed out that the social security mechanism is not that robust. So that has also been the case. Then, as it has facilitated the easy hiring and firing policies, then again that complicates the social security aspect of the labor. So that has also been cited as one of the demerit. Okay, with respect to the second part of the question, that has been the progress so far. Legislations have been there, but ultimately the rules for those codes are to be framed by states, and states have been complacent in this regard. Okay, there has not been any uniformity with respect to consensus with respect to the rules that they should be having with respect to the codes that they are to implement. Okay, so lack of consensus there has been very major issue, and that is why implementation has not been very quick, or you can say there has been lag or delay in the implementation. Then consensus is also not there because of the issues raised by labor unions. As I said previously, that those concerns have been mainly with respect to the bargaining power of the labor unions that they have, or trade unions and labor unions that they have been expressing with respect to the loss, or you can say the decline in their bargaining ability. Okay, with respect to the assertion of the rights of the labor that they used to have, or they were able to do before the introduction of these four labor codes. Okay, and that is why implementation part is actually lagging behind. So it has not been properly implemented across the states, and also in many states still there are no uniformity with respect to the rules of these labor codes. Okay, also the consensus is not there with respect to the social security component and also the role of the trade unions. Okay. What is the need for expanding the regional air connectivity in India? In this context, discuss the government's UDAN scheme and its achievements. Okay. So basically, the first part of the question is about need for expanding the regional connectivity, air connectivity. So not just connectivity, air connectivity. तो एयर कनेक्टिविटी की नीड अगर आपको दिखानी है, connectivity is quite crucial with respect to economic growth, employment generation, infra development, boost to services like tourism, hospitality sector, then decreasing regional disparity. In that sense, promoting the inclusive growth. Understand that one very important challenge in country like India has been to bridge this gap or the deficit, that the gap that exists between the infrastructure, the level of infrastructure available in tier 1 cities on one hand and the level of infrastructure available in tier 2, tier 3 cities on the other. Air connectivity is in smaller cities, in tier 2, tier 3 cities. If we are able to connect them, then that will help in integrating them with the mainstream developmental process. Okay, because the smaller enterprises flourish only in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Any country which has become developed from the cities that we find ourselves in at present time has been able to do so only by this bridging the deficit that exists between the infrastructure in tier 1 and tier 2, tier 3 cities. Okay, so the difference between the infrastructure level in tier 1 on one hand and tier 2, tier 3 on the other has been one of the defining characteristic of developing economy. So for example, China succeeded in bringing about large scale development, and all that to very inclusive development, bringing large chunk of population out of poverty, ensuring large chunk of labor force, making a successful transition from lower to higher sectors of the economy, mainly by developing the infrastructure in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Okay, air connectivity in that sense is going to be quite important in that regard. Okay, because it connects the small cities with the bigger ones, then that actually has a multiplier effect on the growth of both tier 1 as well as tier 2 to tier 3 cities. Okay, when you provide that kind of facilities which are available in tier 1, in tier 2, tier 3 cities, you actually boost the innovation. Okay, because smaller enterprise cannot thrive on tier 1 because of the stiff competition. So they are attracted to tier 1 cities because of the good infrastructure, but then they are repelled by the tier 1 cities because of the competition. And where they go now then? They go to the tier 2, tier 3 cities. But then in those cities, if you do not have good infrastructure, the whole entrepreneurial spirit dies. Okay, if you want to ensure the success of the enterprise, then you have to focus on the development of the infrastructure in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and in that case, air connectivity is going to be quite helpful, as you can just prove it through some other aspects also. For example, regional disparity is also going to get decreased. It will also be addressed by connectivity. It's not just the functioning of the airport. When that kind of development happens, then that actually boosts the whole economy, because it will promote the tourism, and then tourism will promote other ancillary economic activities. The hospitality sector will see boost. Then maybe there are certain specific skills of that local population that also gets highlighted because of the connectivity. Okay, so through air connectivity, what you essentially ensure is that different parts of the country, the people living, the population of different parts of the country start making contribution in the process of production. And that you call inclusive growth in real sense. Because if people are not able to participate in the production process, then you can't say that inclusive growth has taken place. So in that case, that is quite important from that perspective. Okay, Udan scheme has been part of civil aviation policy introduced in the year 2016. Okay, where the government provides various kinds of concessions to the airlines which are planning to serve or which intend to serve the underserved areas. Okay, underserved areas. If you see the progress in this regard, then achievements can be shown by having, because of Udan, there has been the opening of around 400 or over 400 new routes. Okay, and also more than 60 to 65 airports have been either revived or they have been built, and thus have boosted the air connectivity. And then it has also, you can see, offloaded the big airports in big cities. Okay, and then in that case you also see that wherever such kind of services are offered, wherever such kind of revival has happened, you have seen the boost in the economic activity also. Okay, so firstly it is witnessed in form of tourism, and then the ancillary economic activities actually help in boosting the whole region as a whole. Okay, so in that case Udan has been quite important in the revival of that air infrastructure, airports, and the routes, underserved routes. Okay, offloading the big cities and also the traffic in big airports. What are the major challenges faced by Indian irrigation system in recent times? State the measures taken by the government for efficient irrigation management. Okay, you see that in mains the questions are always easy. It's just that you have to focus properly in the syllabus and then prepare a good content. Just look at the major challenges faced by. Major challenges irrigation में क्या है? The irrigation में major challenges, first of all, dependence on monsoon. The vagaries of monsoon, because of the dependence. Okay, then water use efficiency. That has been one major challenge. For example, in many of the cases you will see that generally what has been seen, that farmers resort to flood irrigation. Okay, so water use efficiency is drastically low in case of India if you compare it with, let us say, China or Israel. Okay, then availability, and in this regard there has been regional disparity, especially north and south. So many of the rivers in North India are perennial, and in that case they provide water for irrigation purpose throughout the year, but that has not been the case in southern India and also western India. Okay, so availability, a regional disparity in this regard has been a challenge. Then groundwater depletion. Groundwater depletion has been a challenge, where you see the problem of problem related to flood irrigation. So overuse has also been the problem. Okay, so water logging and salination has also been the concern. Less stress on rainwater harvesting, mismanagement of canal system. These are also the challenges in irrigation sector. Okay, if you look at the second part of the question, that is measures taken by the government for efficient irrigation management. So you have seen the measures taken by the government with respect to this irrigation issue. Many measures, for example, you have seen command area development program, you have seen watershed development project, mainly focusing on the rainwater harvesting. Command area has been focusing on the management of canal system. Okay, Krishi Sachai Yojana has been there. Then there has been the promotion of micro irrigation practices. You have seen many regions in India, for example, Gujarat and the other parts of the world adopting micro irrigation practices in large number. Although Jal Jeevan Mission aims mainly for drinking water, then there has been emphasis with respect to the use of water for agricultural purposes also. Okay, so National Water Mission has also been an initiative under National Action Plan for Climate Change. So these are the measures that government has taken to promote irrigation in India, for the better management of canal system in India, okay, for promoting rainwater harvesting, for ensuring that farmers come to know about other better practices other than flood irrigation system. Okay, resolving the problem of availability and also the environmental problems of waterlogging and salination. Okay, so this is the framework that you needed to adopt in this question. And the questions are actually direct. I don't think that there is a problem in structuring also, because these are quite straightforward. Okay, next question. Elucidate the importance of buffer stocks for stabilizing agriculture prices in India. What are the challenges associated with storage of buffer stock? Okay. So buffer stock as a policy that we have started seeing this as a resort taken by the government during fourth five-year plan, where buffer stocks are maintained with this objective of food security and price stability. Self-reliance, and that again is related to food security only. In the importance point, you will definitely include the food security component, then price stability. Okay, price stability means whenever the supplies are short, the buffer stocks can be used to release more grains to bring the prices under control. And whenever the prices are low, then the supply can be contained to actually again just boost the prices higher to bring stability. Inflation, that is actually related to price stability only, but inflation, that means average increase in the price level of food grains. So there also buffer stocks helps in maintaining a comfortable level of food inflation. Then farmers' welfare is also something that is achieved through buffer stocks, because buffer stocks are maintained by procuring the grains from the farmers either at MSP or procurement price. Okay, where procurement price mainly aims for targeted procurement so that government could run PDS or other welfare schemes. Okay, the farmers' welfare is also one of the objective, we can say, that also shows its importance. Okay, self-reliance, is very important factor. But then there are challenges also, and challenges also with respect to the maintenance of buffer stocks. So as you know that buffer stock norms are there, which are suggested by Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. Okay, and these norms have not been followed properly. So breaching of norms or following the norms itself has been a challenge. Then norms अगर follow नहीं होते तो वहाँ issue क्या है? Overstocking का. Okay, generally in last 1 decade, if you see, then the procurement been happening because has been happening because generally because of this rice wheat centricity. Another feature or another problem in Indian agriculture, because of high MSP. So MSP of wheat and rice has been above market price. So more procurement leading to over procurement, leading to breach of the buffer stock norms. Okay. And that will definitely result into mismanagement, because of limited storage capacity. Okay. Wastage, mainly because of cover and plinth storage. कवर एंड प्लिंथ स्टोरेज, यह सब आप पढ़ते हैं फाउंडेशन में. ओके. Non-professional management. Okay. That means here it is lack of containerized storage. Okay, there has also been the instances of understocking. Okay. Okay, along with mismanagement, there has also been corruption. Many times you would see the nodal agency being overburdened with this task of maintaining the buffer stocks. So these are the challenges because of many other problems. So you're going to relate it with agriculture price policy, the agriculture marketing. Okay, you're also going to relate it with this limited options that we have for ensuring food security in India. Okay, the issue of public stock holding in WTO, you can just relate it with that also. Okay, so many other challenges. Again, a direct question, but very much expected question. Public stock holding has also been one important area in news. And then in last 1 year, you have seen the government struggle in this area. Okay, that made a lot of news in many months in last 1 year. Okay, so these are the core economic questions of GS3. And I found the question not very difficult. But yes, good content was required. So you needed to prepare good content for making a marks fetching answer. This is all. Thank you.
So these are the questions which are specifically from the environment and disaster management. The one question number 7 says industrial pollution of river water. This is about industrial pollution of the river waters is a significant environmental issue in India that you have to give certain examples and to prove that how it is the significant concern. Second aspect of the question is discuss the various measures, that is mitigation measures. That is the second part of the question to deal with this problem and the government's initiative. So there are 3 parts. One, this is how significant it is an issue. The second part is what are the mitigation measures, and the third one is what are the various initiatives of the government. So in this way, you can break the question into 3 parts. The first one is now you will write what is the water pollution or what is the river water pollution. Now in this river water pollution, what is pollution? Simple, it is when desirable, let's say, substances are being removed and undesirable changes are introduced. Undesirable changes means it can be physical. For example, there are some sediments, microorganisms, anything. Second is undesirable, let's say some chemicals are there, some microorganisms can be there. So all these are nothing but undesirable content. Whereas if you will remove the oxygen from the water, then this was desirable entity. So what happened is, if you are removing the oxygen or the oxygen levels are depleting, then also it will be termed as water pollution, right? So what is the water pollution of the river? That is removal of desirable elements in the water and introduction of undesirable elements, right? Undesirable element. Now how this is becoming a kind of concern for India. So certain examples you have to put in. For example, this year there were certain examples. For example, there was Kolak River in Valsad region of Gujarat. And here, because of the industrial, let's say, dumping, what happened is one stream was connected to this river, that is Kolak River. This was highly polluted, which resulted into many of the fishes were killed in this area. So this is the example of Valsad's Kolak River, that is in Gujarat. Then second was the Periyar River. Right now only, this was the it was the month of May, and it was 2024 when it was seen that there were so many fishes which were killed. And it was also again because of there is one industrial pollution, industrial park, there is ADR, right? So this is the two example. The third example is, it is Bhilwara. Bhilwara, it is in Rajasthan, which is famous as a textile city. So because of this textile city, what happens is they are creating so many of the pollutants. And what is the irony here? There are some common effluent treatment plants, and these plants are not sufficient enough to treat the water of this textile industries. And therefore, there is river, that is Luni River, which comes from Rajasthan, goes to Run of Kutch. And this river has also been polluted very highly. And how one can forget about Damodar River? Damodar River has been converted into a biological desert. What is the meaning of biological desert? Means it is no biodiversity is found now in this Damodar River because of there is Damodar Valley Corporation, and some more industries are there. They are dumping their effluents directly into the river. So this is how, with the help of some examples, you could narrate that why this problem is ever increasing and a very significant concern for India. This is the first part. Now in the second part, it is about mitigation measures. Means, okay, water bodies are polluted. Now how to mitigate this problem? So in this mitigation part, what we could write, say here, how to mitigate. So number one, mitigation measures. Number one, prevent the dumping. And if the water from industrial discharge is going to be dumped, then make it sure that this is treated very well. So number one, it is the common effluent treatment plants with enough capacity are to be employed in between some, let's say, cluster of industries. Let's say this plant can be in between 4 or 5 or 10 industries, right? So this type of the plant should be employed, and it is to be ensured that this water which is going to be discharged must be treated very well. Second is ensure this, that there is zero liquid discharge in the rivers. And this has been seen, especially in case of Tamil Nadu. This model of zero liquid discharge was implemented, and this was implemented very well for Noyal River. This river is Noyal. It is in Tamil Nadu, where the pollution levels were increasing. To curb this pollution levels, the zero liquid discharge policy was implemented here. For the industries, now it is not allowed to dump this pollutant, especially in the form of liquids, into the rivers, right? That is the second mechanism. Third mechanism could be, you can remove some of the pollutants with the help of, let's say, some biological solutions. So what are these biological solutions? Biological solutions can be, for example, you can take the help of some microorganisms. For example, if there is some water and if the oil has been spilled over this water, then we can introduce one particular bacteria that is known as Olizapper. So this Olizapper is known for this property that it can eat this all the water, this oil spill on the water surface. So this type of the measures where microorganisms have been employed in cleaning this type of the pollution load, these mechanisms are known as bioremediation. So this method where Olizapper was cleaning this oil spill, it is nothing but the part of bioremediation. In the same way, some of the plants are also known for this property where they can extract the pollutants from the water body and they can keep them into their root systems for a longer period of time. Means one way it is they are clearing, okay, the load or the pollutant load in the waters. So that method comes under, again, this is bioremediation. When the microorganisms are used, then if the plants are used, then this is known as phytoremediation. Next, for example, sometime what happens na, the warm water or the hot waters from the industries may also be discharged into the river. Now this is also a kind of pollution. Why? Because these organisms which are living in the aquatic ecosystem, they are highly sensitive to the temperature. And if the temperature is, let's say, some degree higher than their capacity to sustain, then this will result into what? They will die out. And therefore, it is to be ensured that water, when it is released, it is not only treated very well, but also the warm and hot waters should not be released into the rivers. That is to be ensured. So this is how the next mitigation measure could be. Another methods are, for example, many of the industries are burning fossil fuels. They are not using clean technologies. Still, they are operating with the old and conventional technologies, and therefore they are creating more pollution load. Now, what we can do, we can switch to, let's say, clean technologies where decarbonization of the economy will be the wholesale idea or the wholesome idea. So in this way, some green technologies, some, let's say, sources of renewable energy could also be used in order to reduce the pollutions, especially in this way. Now, what are the another, let's say, what is the another dimension of this question? That is about what are the policies and initiatives of the government, how the government is tackling this problem. Now see here, government has taken many of the initiative. For example, especially you can cite, let's say, for the Ganga, what is the initiative? For example, for the Ganga, we have Namami Gange initiative. We are also putting this disposable potalus. What are potalus? Let's say these are the portable toilets, especially in such villages. Let's say this is the Ganga. The villages which are especially nearby in the Ganga region, we are putting or we are employing here the mobile toilets so that people should not come in this area and let's say they should not dispose their waste in this river directly. So this is the one another initiative which is going on in India. Then we have National River Conservation Plan. We have, let's say, National Mission for Clean Chambal. We have National Mission for Clean Narmada. We have river linking project where one part also says that we have to restore the natural flow of the river. So in this way, we are working on the regeneration of the rivers. Also, when it comes to the policies, government has also launched online continuous monitoring for this common effluent treatment plants, whether they are working or not, what is their capacity, whether they are able to treat this effluent load, yes or not. In this way, various mechanisms are working. Then one more, that is industrial discharge rules were prepared by Government of India under EPA 1986. So in these rules, it is clearly highlighted that what should not be discharged into the rivers. So these are the various measures you could cite. Some of them, let's say 5, 6, 7, we have seen National Mission for Clean, let's say Ganga, for Narmada, for Chambal. We have the National River Conservation Plan. We have the rules, what to be discharged, what not to be under the EPA, that is Environment Protection Act. And if the rules that is under this EPA are violated, then they can attract some stringent actions from the Government of India. There are certain another bodies, statutory bodies, which we have formed. Let's say There is pollution control boards are there respectively in the states also, in the central government also. So this is the various measures and the policy frameworks you could have written about. Now the question here, the last part is conclusion. So in this conclusion, what you could have written, I am giving you some case studies. So one case study is of Latur in Maharashtra. This Latur in way back 2016, here the water trains were coming in this area, water trains. And now it is the self-sustaining kind of, we can say, district. Means their water resources have been recharged after this 2016 onwards. Why? Because of the proactive approach that they have employed. And especially here, the one approach that is I found very, we can say, citable, that is Nadi Parikrama. What is this Nadi Parikrama? In this Nadi Parikrama, one tehsildar of that particular area, let's say this is the area, there are a number of smaller rivers. Now it is the duty of the tehsildar to do this parikrama, or just to take a round around these rivers and to ensure that they are preserved. No, not someone is, let's say, dumping anything inside these rivers. So this type of initiative where the magistrate level of officer like tehsildar himself, they were involved in maintaining this clean flow, in maintaining this regeneration of the river, in, let's say, keeping people at bay from discharging the effluents inside these rivers. And in this way, this proactive approach was employed, and now this district is self-sustaining in terms of its water needs. This is the classic example. Another, let's say, the approach, if you want to use, there is one NGO that is Tarun Bharat Sangh. This is Tarun Bharat Sangh. This Tarun Bharat Sangh is a very famous environmental organization. It is working especially with its participatory approach, and it is restoring so many rivers, and especially the example you can cite, that is Rupa Rail River in the district of Alwar, has been regenerated by this organization. Man is Dr. Rajendra. He also received many of the awards in terms of, let's say, in his proactive role of restoring the water bodies, various rivers and all. So this is also the Dr. Rajendra ji. He is known as Waterman of India also. So this is Tarun Bharat Sangh. The another principle that you could say in the conclusion, we could have used Dublin principle. So what is Dublin principle? The Dublin principle where the participatory approach was employed. So here also we are employing this participatory approach, but this is from the organization Tarun Bharat Sangh. Here, when I was mentioning Tarun Bharat Sangh's role, they have made this Gram Panchayats on the same lines of Gram Panchayat, they have made Pani Panchayats. So they were also ensuring with this Pani Panchayats how to restore the water bodies in that particular area. The villages which were sharing that river commonly, they were given responsibility to maintain ecological flow of the river. So in this way, you can write some of the good points. So please remember, you can break this question into some parts and then answer them. Okay. So this was the first question. So the next question is, what role do environmental NGOs and activists play in influencing environmental impact assessment? So always remember, these are the organizations, especially the NGOs, which will ensure, let's say, that the people who are often neglected, the people who are not often heard, they should be able to raise their concern through these NGOs, right? This is the main role that they are playing. Second, they are also ensuring, let's say, the government is listening, not only listening, also taking these people very seriously, taking their concerns very seriously. So this is the role that NGOs are playing. You can also consider them fifth pillar in terms of democracy. The four pillars are already there. Fifth, you can consider them. Now here, what is the role of NGOs, especially in the environment impact assessment? So in case of environment impact assessment, the first and important role that they play, that is the advocacy of people. Advocacy of people. This is the important role that they play. Second, if the local people are not aware about what is the project, so this is also their role, that is to bring awareness in the, let's say, that particular society. Awareness means to let them know what could be the positive of that particular project, what could be the negative of that project, and then they will have, let's say the local people now will have all the aspects of positive and negative. Now they can give their consent, okay? They can give their consent to the project based on, let's say, informed decision. It would be based on the information. This is going to be informed decision, right? So because often such mega projects are commissioned in some very rural areas or the remote areas away from the city. Maybe there are some local tribes or some local people are living who are not able to understand what this project can bring into their area. So it is the role of these NGOs to bring this awareness, है ना? And next is, let's say the government is now forcing this project to come inside, and the local population is registering. Then what could be the legal solutions? These legal solutions are provided with the help of this NGO. So this is how they will play as legal friends. They are going to be legal friends of the local people. So they can go through legal mechanisms. For example, you may have heard this one, Narmada Bachao Andolan, where many of the, let's say, environment-related concerns were raised, especially by this Medha Patkar. So what happened is, finally, there were so many environmental as well as social impact assessments were conducted. And finally, government has to modify the various, let's say, the project-related details in that particular Narmada project. Okay. So this is how the NGOs and the activists can play their proactive role. And the legal, that is with the help of court, it was ensured, right, that government should conduct various surveys. So this is one example also. 4 examples they have asked. One example is Narmada Bachao Andolan, and here the role which was played, many of the impact related assessments were conducted. So this is one example. Next is, let's say, this is government, and here this is industry. Let's say industry has all the, let's say, permits from the government, and this impact assessment is to be conducted. So all this consultation and participation of the people generally assured by these NGOs. Even government will also call these NGOs which are there. They are working for the local people in order to explain that what are going to be the benefits and, let's say, some concerns if they are in that particular area if this project is to be commissioned. So this is how they will help in ensuring participation of the people, consultation of the people. Also, this is the role of NGOs. Then next is, for example, this, let's say, when the project and related details were outlined, it is now the role of NGO becomes very crucial, so that they can understand whether this project is hiding some detail or not, whether the enough due, let's say, legitimate process has been have been followed or not. So this monitoring mechanism is also a kind of their watch group, okay, to ensure that there are the things which are well in order according to the environmental conditions, according to that area. If it is the sensitive area, then it becomes mandatory. So this is how the this role, that is the proactive role, has been played by many of these NGOs. Now here the 4 examples has been asked. So one example we already cited, that is the Narmada Bachao Andolan, where because of this activist, it was ensured that multiple assessments were conducted and finally the project was modified. This is the one example. The second example was the very famous company of Vedanta when it was reaching into Niamgiri Hills. So what happened is the local population registered this mining related industrial activities of Vedanta group, and finally what happened is the Vedanta group has to withdraw after Supreme Court's intervention. Supreme Court in 2013 gave this, let's say, decision. See here. So this is number 1, Narmada Bachao. So what is the role played by this activist Medha Patkar here? So the role was multiple social and environmental impact assessments were conducted here. The second is we are talking about the Vedanta's project in the Niamgiri Hills. Vedanta project in the Niamgiri Hills. In this, finally, the Supreme Court had to intervene in 2013, and Supreme Court said those people which are living in the Niamgiri Hills, they have all the right to decide whether this project should come into their areas or not. and people registered that one, and therefore Vedanta had no other option but to withdraw from that area. Third, very we can say classical example was where the Greenpeace India, that is the NGO, it played very important role. This is POSCO plant in Odisha. It was to be commissioned at the coastal area, and this coastal region was very ecologically sensitive. So Greenpeace India made it sure that this project should not be implemented in this area particularly. That is ecologically sensible. This area was sensitive. This area was. Now after let's say continuous protest and continuous agitation, finally it is in 2017 this company had no other option but to withdraw this plant from that area. Next is one more example is Sterlite copper plant. It was to be commissioned. It was planned for the Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu. But what happened is, again, there were some groups. Let's say this was one NGO that was known as MDMK. Second NGO was environmental health groups, and some local activists were there, and they made it sure that this plant, because it was also violating so many local environmental, let's say, concerns there. So therefore, finally, it had also stalled. This project was also stalled by the role of NGO. In that way, NGOs have been playing very active role in the, let's say, especially in this environment-related concerns. Okay. So the next question is, what is disaster resilience? Next is how it is determined. Describe various elements. So here some parts are there. How it is determined. This is the second part. One is disaster resilience. Second is how it is determined. Third is what are the elements which are taken care of while making this framework. And the next is what are the global targets of this Sendai framework. Okay, so there are 4 dimensions. One by one, what is disaster resilience? So what is resilience? Means how much you can, you have the capacity to sustain a particular shock. That is nothing but disaster. So this is nothing but the adaptive capacity, or we can say how much we can adapt and recover from that situation of disaster. So this is known as disaster resilience. So it is nothing but it is a kind of concept where we will see whether this disaster will bring long-term, let's say, repercussions or short-term. So it is the disaster resilience when we will say only the situation is hampering short-term activities of the human being, infrastructure and all these things for the short period of time. We will recover soon. So this is the basic soul of this disaster resilience. Now the next is how it is determined. So for the determination, how it is determined? So we have to access various things. For example, what is the risk first? So risk assessment is necessary. Second, we will see the adaptive capacity of the individuals, that is of community of that particular region. So all these adaptive capacities are to be seen. Then we will see the human capital or human, let's say, resources there. So what happens if the human resources are well employed here? So it would be easy to handle this disaster. Then the next is technology. What are the technological solutions available to handle and mitigate the situation? Fifth would be, let's say, what are the various resources? Resources means in terms of, let's say, financial resources. Technology we have already seen here. So technology also, and human resources we have seen here. So all the resources are to be thoroughly assessed. Sixth would be, that is human capital. So what is human capital? So it is sometimes desired that these disasters can be a kind of depressors, right? Especially we have seen in the times of COVID, that is nothing but many of the people were, let's say, pushed into the webs of depression, right? So in order to avoid such depression related, let's say, phenomena, social trust, communication, friend and families when they are together. So this becomes very, very important. So human capital also play a very vital role. So all these are nothing but the kind of dimensions to determine what is going to be the disaster resilience of that individual, community and of the particular region. Now the next part says what are the various elements of disaster resilient framework, right? So see here, what is the next one? See here. So in this, let's say, plan or the framework, the first one is we will identify what is the risk. So first becomes risk identification. This is the first thing. Then we will respond. So what is going to be our response? Let's say the first one is to plan and prepare. And you will have to ensure this plan is equity based. You should also have to ensure that all the people, even if they are marginalized, they are the poor people, they should be taken care of in this plan. Then it is, let's say, to respond. Okay. So now you have to respond to this disaster. And now after the response, what happens is, let's say whatever the losses were brought or whatever the casualties happened, then the next part is rehabilitation and recovery. Rehabilitation and recovery and minimization of the losses, right? This is nothing but the framework. And the last part would be, or before we can say here, or before giving this response, before this plan and preparation, you have to ensure capacity building also. If there are some gaps in this adaptive capacity or the resilience, then we'll have to ensure capacity building also. So all these are nothing but the part of the framework, that is resilient framework. Identify the risk, plan and prepare. This plan must be inclusive, equity based it should be, capacity building of that particular individual, community, region, then the response, then finally rehabilitation and recovery of the people. Okay? These are going to be the components inside a framework. Next is Sendai framework, that is from 2015 to 30 has been there. In this plan, there are certain elements. For example, mortality related to the disasters are to be reduced. There should not be direct economic losses. Minimize the damage to critical infrastructure. Then international cooperation, especially for the poor and let's say small countries, it is very well desired. Then improve the access to various technologies, especially the technologies related to early warning system. So these all were the key elements which were emphasized into Sendai framework. What are these key elements? Again, I'm repeating. The mortality is to be reduced, minimize the losses, economic losses should be minimized. Then there should not be direct loss to the critical infrastructure, direct loss to the economy. The small and marginal countries are to be given voices, means they should be assisted. Their participation especially is to be ensured, especially in the technologies like early warning system. So these all are the elements which were highlighted in the Sendai framework. Okay. So next question is about flooding, especially the urban flood is the kind of common area nowadays and common problem. We have witnessing all these urban floods in various, let's say, cities, Delhi, Gurgaon, the urban floods of Tamil Nadu, Kerala are very, we can say, in the news. Now, the causes have been asked here. What are the causes of this disaster? Feature of two such major flood events in the last 2 decades in India. Describe the policies and framework in India. So we have multiple dimensions again here. So what happens in the urban region, especially, see here, let's say some river, let's say this is the urban setup. Now what happened is there is cementation or the concretization of this entire urban area is going on. So because of that, what happened is whenever there is the rainfall event, the water is not percolating down, rather it is going into the various other areas in the form of runoff. So what happens is runoff has been increasing continuously, and therefore sometime what happens is the volume of that river when it passes through any urban site, it can be as high as 6 to 8 times in terms of water volume, I am saying. Why? Because water is not getting percolating down inside. This is directly now reaching into the catchment. So these catchments have been developed. Catchment of the rivers has been developed, has been encroached, and therefore what happens is even the rainfall events of, let's say, having 20 to 30 mm of the rainfall in 1 hour can cause urban floods. So this is a kind of common problem nowadays. Now the second aspect says, what are the causes of this disaster of urban floods, right? Now see here, what are the causes? Number one is, most of our cities are not having the disaster, storm drainage systems, right? So if they do have this storm drainage system. In many of our cities, it is not found, and in some of the cities, if it is found, it is of very less capacity. Let's say they are of this much of efficiency, means they can handle 15 to 20 mm of water per hour. And now what happens is, if you will see the single day rainfall of Mumbai, it can be as high as 800 mm. Yes, so 800 mm. Now think about this one. The capacity of this drainage, storm drainage, is 15 to 20 mm of hour. So this type of conventional infrastructure that we are using to solve the modern problem, okay, that is of urban flood, this infrastructure which is highly inefficient, this is known as grey infrastructure. So we are using mostly grey infrastructure to handle this problem. Second is, what happened is, let's say these were the rivers earlier. Now these river sides have been encroached by the human population, especially this is very common in the urban centers. So what happens is, this area, that is channel of the river, is now narrowed down. And what happens is, if there is the rainfall event, this is even the normal rainfall that can bring flood in this entire city. Why? Because of their channels have been encroached. So this problem of encroachment is the another thing. So second one is the encroachment of the catchments, especially encroachment of the catchments. Next is unplanned and haphazard growth of the cities. Now, because of this unplanned growth, what happens is, not only the population is increasing, but also the waste creation is continuously increasing. And the second thing is, this waste is often not recycled at that scale at what we are generating. So what happens is, most of the solid waste is also sent into the rivers. Our storm water drainage systems are also clogged. They are not maintained. So therefore, what happens is, it is the solid waste dumping into these rivers are also the kind of causes to invite this events of flood disasters, right? Then there is, of course, improper disposal we have seen of the solid, maintenance of this storm drainage system we have seen. The another problem is, nowadays what is happening because of this global warming and the climate change, what is happening, sometimes this cloudburst events are now becoming very common. What are these cloudbursts? Where the intensity of the rainfall can be as high as 250 mm per hour to 300 mm per hour. We have seen this type of the cases, multiple cases. Let's say in 2020, it was in Himachal Pradesh. What happened? There was this type of the cloudburst event in the July of 2020. Leh and Ladakh, which otherwise received 30 mm of the rainfall, they received somewhere 250 mm of rainfall in one single hour. And right now, recently, we have seen many of the disasters, like flood disasters, are caused because of this heavy rainfall which is caused. I'm not taking the scene of cloudburst in Delhi, Mumbai. I'm just saying even the heavy rainfall was sufficient enough to bring this flood into that particular area. Why? Because we have created these problems. Okay. Now, these are, let's say, the climate change is also a kind of factor here. Because of the climate change, what is happening? The rainfall events are becoming very, very unpredictable. Sometimes the rain would be very high and huge. Sometimes in a very, let's say, short window, there would be so much of the rainfall which will be poured down in that particular area. So it becomes almost, so because of this climate change, deforestation, urban planning related issues, resilient infrastructure is not there in our cities, responsive is not the planning in our cities. Responsive means we do not have, let's say, the response based plan or the participatory plan, so that we can manage in this we can manage this type of the disasters. So because of all these reasons, we have seen multiple events. Now the second the another part says, mention major floods of last 2 decades. Here you can cite the example of Kerala's flood. You can also cite the example of Chennai flood. Chennai floods of 2015. If you take about the economic loss, only 20,000 crore rupees economic loss was there because of this particular event, that is the urban flood of Kerala. In the same way, there was Chennai floods in 2008. They caused the loss of 30,000 crore rupees. This is only economic cost we are counting. What if we count the loss of, let's say, vegetation, the loss of biodiversity? So economic loss was counted, but still environmental loss, ecosystem related loss was not counted. If you will take this losses also into the account, they cause so much of the loss which is almost unbearable because of these urban floods. Now the next thing is, what are the policies which are of the government and what are the various frameworks? So here I will mention some of the policies. For example, we do have urban flood related guidelines which have been mentioned under NDMA, that is National Disaster Management Authority. These urban flood related guidelines were highlighted in 2010. So we do have the urban flood related guidelines under NDMA. So we have this guidelines, flood guidelines. Then after this guideline, also it was advised and it was mandated that every city must have their master drainage plan. So master drainage plans were mandated. Drainage plans were mandated, right? Then we do have so many of the things. For example, we have the Mission Amrit, where we are working on this urban infrastructure to regenerate this urban infrastructure. So Amrit is their national flood risk mitigation framework is there. We are there in this framework, mapping all the flood zones, okay, which are the areas which can see the floods often. Then we have so many ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction policies. Ecosystem-based means, for example, we do have National Mission for Sustainable Habitat. We have National Water Mission. We have National Mission for Green India under NAPCC, that is National Action Plan for Climate Change. So we do have so many of the frameworks and plans. Then how we can forget about INDCs? INDC means in the Paris deal, in the Paris Agreement of 2015, we promised that we will cut the carbon emissions in our economy. In a way, we are contributing to what? We are now going to cut emissions, and therefore climate change related risk are to be reduced. This was committed by India, right? And in the same way, we have also created right now carbon market mechanism so that carbon as a commodity can be traded easily in this market. So these are the various policy and let's say government initiatives to handle this type of floods, or we can say long-term and short-term planning also is there. Now, in the conclusion, what you could write, for the conclusion, you can all suggest how these causes can be removed or how these causes can be solved. For example, the urban regions are unplanned. There are, let's say, the growth of this urban centers is unplanned, unchecked. Therefore, what happens is such type of the problems are often caused. So you can say here, sponge cities are to be made in order to handle this situation. Sponge city means you have to assure or you have to ensure that your city is not too concretized so that water can percolate easily. So this was about this question.
Hello everyone. Let's now deal with the internal security portion of the GS3. GS3 2024. Yes, you all have been waiting for the discussion. Now, internal security as a topic has been quite prominent. It is one of the low-hanging fruits for GS3. Near about what the trend says is there are around 4 to 5 questions from internal security and around 50 marks you can easily attempt from internal security in GS3. Now, in 50 marks, if you have prepared well, because this is, as I said, a low-hanging fruit, you'll be able to score a good 30-35 marks if you have prepared well. So, continuing the trend, UPSC has again asked 4 questions this year. 9th question, 10th question, 19th and 20th question. So, let's discuss each one of them one by one. All right, the first question says, explain how narco-terrorism has emerged as a serious threat to the country and we have to suggest suitable measures to counter it. So we know what the theme would be. That is narco-terrorism. We know what the structure of the answer would be. First, we'll be talking about narco-terrorism. If at all required, we can also draw a diagram. Yes. Then we'll be discussing how it is a serious threat how it is a serious threat. You'll be talking about different dimensions here. Then we'll be giving measures. Suggest suitable measures. If required, you can also mention certain measures that have already been taken. Right? Now, what is narco-terrorism? Explained through a diagram, we can talk about that it is a nexus between the drug lords, the drug cartels, the drug syndicates on one end, and the terrorists or terrorist group on the other. So this nexus came to be known as it evolved in 1980s and 1990s, narco-terrorism. Now, how does this nexus work? We know that the profits from narcotics, from drug supply, etc., is being supplied for funding the terrorist activities. So, that is funding. In return, the terrorist group provides safe havens to the area of production of these drugs and also to the supply chains. Yes, this is how this works. And at times, this is run by the terrorist groups also. Yes. So we will be talking about that it is a nexus between these two. That would be the definition. If at all you feel like introducing one of the recent events, one of the recent report, you can do that. Then in diagram portion, you'll be, of course, talking about the nexus. Then why it is a serious threat. Narco-terrorism is one of the biggest threat that we are facing presently because, again, it is important to draw a diagram here or a map here. First of all, is the geographical proximity of India in such a way yes, we are sandwiched between Golden Crescent and Golden Triangle. Now, what are these? We all know that Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan form the part of the Golden Crescent on the western end, and on the eastern end, it is Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. So, these are where the majority of the production of drugs, narcotics happens. And it also, through various means, tend to enter India. Yes. Do draw this diagram that we are sandwiched. You will be definitely utilizing these two as the whole point of geographical proximity to these areas. Yes. And ultimately, these funds, whatever profits they gain, these funds are again used for terrorist activities and then penetrations happens. Yes. Border conflicts happen. This is how one of the biggest challenges, geographical proximity. Within this, you can also talk about cross-border terrorism. Yes, then you can talk about one of the, do draw this map for sure. You can utilize the first half as you will be doing for, let's say, in map questions related to border issues. One of the question is related to Pakistan-China border issue as well. Do try to include that as well. Then it becomes a threat to national security. How it is a threat to national security? Because now we are seeing a new wave of terrorism in the area of Jammu. The modus operandi is changing. Now they are shifting from Kashmir to the Jammu region. Why? Because, and also there is a lot of activity in the Punjab region, the Pathankot region. Why is that? Because one is they have found new ways of infiltration, and secondly, they are also entering through means of funds transferred through money laundering, ultimately through narcotics. Yes. Then Why it is a security, one of the biggest security threat is that when whatever the supply chains are for narcotics can also become the supply chain for terrorist activities. For example, they have shared infrastructure by which they are supplying the drugs. They can also supply the weapons, the bombs, yes, the plans, yes. So this is again one of the biggest challenge of this nexus. Another big challenge of this nexus is that it implicates or tend to influence the cognitive behavior of the individuals living in the border areas, the Jammu region specifically. So they tend to, first of all, impact their behavior, impact their cognitive skills to comprehend the situation. Then they'll be indoctrinated with different ideologies and ultimately would be turned against the idea of India. That is one of the biggest challenge. And of course, you can always mention the public health concern associated. With the usage of drugs, as we are seeing in Punjab also. Yes. So this is the first heading you'll be talking about, the serious threat. Then we'll be talking about how these can be countered and what are the measures that can be taken. One of the biggest measure, I'll write in short, one of the most important or the biggest measure is development, first of all. By what means are we saying that development is one of the important features? Because when they'll be having jobs, when they'll be having opportunities, when there will be livelihood opportunities, when there will be opportunities to travel, explore the world, and of course integrate emotionally also at deeper levels with India, then they will be less inclined for, or they'll have less time and they'll be less inclined to get into the activities like terrorism or of course having to get into drugs. Then with this, we also need to rehabilitate the individuals who are already in this trap. We need to rehabilitate. The army is doing already Operation Sadbhavana, wherein they are raising the awareness about the issue, about the linkages, about the nexus between the two, and also about the counseling, how to get out of this. Yes, de-radicalization is also being taken place. Rehab is also happening. Yes. Then there is, what we need to do is minimize the coordination gap between the institutional arrangements. Like we have a Narcotics Control Bureau, first of all. Narcotics Control Bureau. And then we also have Narcotics Coordination Center that was established in 2016. They must work in tandem and of course within the law which was formed in 1985 by the government, that is Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act of 1985. Keep mentioning. It is important to convey that you also have knowledge. It is not just you have it and you do not convey it. You have to keep dropping the keywords. Yes. Then what else you can do? You can talk about the security concerns. How to deal with the security concerns? You'll be ensuring that there is proper border management. There is no infiltration. There is due fencing which is done. There is lot of intel sharing happening at different levels that can be done. There can be floodlights installed at the borders. Easier said than done. Fencing can be done, etc. Then at the international level, we can have multilateral cooperation, at multilateral forums also. We already are a part of UNODC, United Nations Office for Drugs Related Crimes, right? Then we are also part of the Colombo Conclave, Colombo Security Conflict, which was formed in 2011. India, Sri Lanka, Myanmar initially, India, Sri Lanka and Maldives initially established it. So that is where we can start from. Beyond that, we can also include recreation activities to tourism, etc., in rehab, etc. You can put it that community development, community cohesion, or soft power towards India, education, etc. can increase the tilt. So they are specifically asking for measures. They do not get into a lot of challenges, then suggestions, because it is a 10 marker. Yes, we have done a lot in the first part also. Yes, that is what you can include in the first 2 pages. Right, moving on to the next question. Of course, conclude on the positive lines that this is one of the biggest challenge, and for a new India to be secure India, we need a antidote for narco terrorism. Yes. Then we are talking about the Digital Personal Data Protection Act 2023. What is the context and what are the salient features? And again, it is not asking about a lot of criticism, a lot of way forward, etc. It is majorly about context and salient features. Yes, if you are getting into the salient features, you wouldn't have the space and the time to get into the other headings also. So in pre-conclusion, maybe you can mention it in a passing reference, but maybe not as a heading. So first of all, Digital Personal Data Protection Act. Yes, that is the theme here. We'll be talking about what it is. Then we'll be talking about the context, as is the demand of the question, and then we'll be talking about the salient features of this act. If you are done with this, then it is more than enough. You can conclude. So what is Digital Personal Data Protection Act? We know that we'll be covering about what bills, etc. were introduced during the context part. Now, we know that it is a comprehensive legal framework. Yes, for what? It ensures that the collection and processing of personal data is done in sync with the rights of the individuals. Yes, and also, if required, it is done in accordance with the law. We'll be seeing in detail what exceptions, etc. are being provided under this particular act. Yes, so it ensures that a comprehensive legal framework is there for processing of personal data and also protection of personal data. Now, talking about the context, you will see about the build-up. We can always start from the right to privacy. K.S. Puttaswamy case. Of 2017, wherein right to privacy was declared as a fundamental right under Article 21. You have seen that as PYQs also. Then we also know that we are seeing a digital revolution since then. Yes, digital revolution in what forms? Now we have over 85 crores internet users. We have near about 100 crores of mobile smartphone users. Then we are moving from 4G to 5G. We are talking about 6G now. We have AI, machine learning, Internet of Things. Yes, a lot is happening. Now we are also talking about digital payments, digital education, e-governance, etc. So everything is happening under the guise of digital revolution. So that is one of the contexts we need this particular bill. Now, we can also say that digital data, or let's say data, is the new gold. Why it is becoming a new gold? Because this is what big companies are extracting and making their policies, their product based on this data. This data is converted into technologies like big data, and from there on, a echo chamber is created, a preference-based content flow is created for you to watch. Yes, if you are opening an e-commerce app, you will be witnessing that, okay, these are the products I was last exploring, or these are the products I was looking for, talking for, etc. Right? Then within the context, you can also talk about the previous bills which were introduced in 2019 and 2022. Yes. So on these lines, we can set the context that this is what led to the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. Now, what are the salient features? I would expect you and the people who have attempted it that they would have drawn a diagram also, and of course they would have continued with the salient features for good 1 page of the answer, because there are a lot of salient features. You can write 10-15 points, but of course you can prioritize them. Now, what are the salient features? We know that they are talking about data principles, the individual whose data will be required. So the ownership would be for data principles, you and me. And then there will be data fiduciaries, or some significant data fiduciaries. For them, they'll be important for to register. And these are the companies who will be collecting and processing your personal data. Yes. Then another institutional arrangement is digital personal or digital protection board. It has been established. We'll be seeing what are the powers, etc. Then there are certain exceptions also to it. There are certain exceptions at different levels. Yes, there are certain other features. Now, what are the rights of these data principles? First of all, the biggest right is that they have the right to know what they are enrolling into. What are they agreeing upon? Yes, you would have seen that you are getting into a site and it says that we are using cookies. Now, when you are using cookies, you are not aware. You are just saying, okay, accept all, reject all, etc. But when you are accepting, you are not very aware of what all is there, because that is a huge document and you cannot read. Only an expert can get into the details and its ramifications. So first of all, it should be quite visible. You have the right to information. If you are giving your consent to collect your data or process your data, then your consent has to be, or the data has to be quite visible. Yes, your consent has to be based on the idea that you are approving it. Then whatever the data is, you can correct it, you can erase it. You also have the right to grievance redressal, and if required, you can also withdraw the consent. So these are the rights of, if at all the person feels that, okay, down the line, whenever I die, I would like to nominate some individual, they can also do that, who will be regulating their data. About the data fiduciaries, they'll be naturally processing data. They required some safeguards. Government or this act ensure that they are providing safeguards. Safeguards to what? If at all there is some data breach, etc. What are the safeguards they are having? And if there is any data breach, they need to report to this board and also to the individual. It is mandatory for them to do that. Also, they need to appoint an officer, the data protection officer and consent manager, who will be managing your consent. You will be relating with that. Yes. Then it will be transferring your data. So data transfer outside the country is allowed. For example, some companies based outside, let's say Facebook, etc., or WhatsApp. It is based outside and it wants to transfer your data to a particular country. So the government of India would provide a list of countries that are to which this data can be transferred. Yes, all this you will be talking in the salient features. You can go one by one under the headings. Yes, so only those countries, and for that we have different eligibility criteria to include in the list. For example, the civil liberties in that country, the technology, the advancement of that country. Yes, all that is, or the whatever relations India has with that country. Now, this board would ensure the compliance of this act. Whatever the provisions are there, it is there to see compliance. It can put into inquiry. It can give directions also, and if required, it can go for penalty also if there is any violation. And if there is any concerns, for example, there is grievance redressal, so it can go and appeal in the board also. The person can visit the board. Now there are certain exceptions. What are the exceptions? The government agencies relating to national security agencies, law enforcement agencies, they can access your data. Yes. Then if at all there is a medical emergency and there is no provision that your consent can be obtained, but it is important to save you also. So medical emergency is another. Then there are other exceptions like for statistics, research, etc. We can utilize this personal data also, right? Then there are other provisions related to child, related to grievance redressal, related to non-compliance, etc. You can go on about the salient features, right? In conclusion, if at all you want to give certain suggestions, you can give that. In conclusion, you can, again, when we are talking about, let's say, secure India, because it is an internal security question, you can always mention that we need a digitally secure India. Yes, new India or the 21st century India. Then we are talking about the third question. India has a long troubled border with Pakistan and China. We are talking about the border challenges with Pakistan and China. And we have to examine the security challenges and conflicting issues at these borders. And then we have to seek what has been done under these two schemes, BADP and BIM schemes, right? So we know the context. It is a 15 marker. First of all, you will be talking about Indian borders. Do mention Pakistan and China, etc. Then we'll be talking about the conflicting issues and security challenges. People can also differentiate between the two. You can have two headings, but I would suggest, because there will already be a lot of headings. Then we will be talking about BADP and also BIM before concluding. Yes. So let's simplify the introduction that Indian border with Pakistan, you can mention the static areas, like for example, with Pakistan, we have around 323 kilometer border. With China, we have around 3488 long kilometer, etc. But these borders have been long troubled. Yes, a simple introduction. Then we'll be talking about the security challenges. Because a lot is coming up, you will be drawing a map also. Just a second. Yes, that would be the map. Of course, extended till the borders. We have Pakistan, China, and then you'll be beautifying it. It will be a little longer process. You can see topper copies, etc. from ForumIAS, good copies. Many people do that whenever discussing the border issues with China and Pakistan. Yes, we'll be naturally dividing it into western sectors, the central sector, the middle sector, all the eastern sector, where we'll be talking about the McMahon line. Yes, then we'll be talking about the LOC and LAC. LOC and LAC. Yes, we'll be talking about Aksai Chin. Keep highlighting. We'll be talking about Aksai Chin. We'll be talking about Galwan Valley. You keep highlighting. We'll be talking about Pongong So Lake, Demchok, etc. Right? Then we'll be talking about whenever, okay, let's highlight the borders with China, issues with borders with China, Tawang Valley. Then we can talk about Doklam. Then you can, of course, talk about Arunachal Pradesh as a whole, which is claims at the southern Tibet. Yes, from the Pakistan side, we have the Saltoro Ridge. Yes, Sakshgam Valley. Then we have the Sir Creek issue. Yes, and of course, the Siachen Glacier. Siachen Glacier and the POK itself is one of the biggest border issues. Yes. So this is what you will be reflecting in the security challenge also, that giving various examples, you will be correlating. Yes. Then we'll be talking about what types of security challenges are there. The border dispute you will be talking about. You can mention always about the Galwan Valley. You can always mention about the challenge of border infiltration, cross-border infiltration, border dispute leading to conflicts. Yes, I'll be just writing the headings. Just try to include the issues, Galwan Valley, Doklam issue, etc., or the recent Jammu upheaval, etc. You can always mention. Yes. Then we'll be talking about, as a security challenge, national security challenge. Yes, when there will be infiltration, there will be terrorist attack, as we are, again, as I said, witnessing. What are the security challenges with these borders? We can also talk about one of the biggest challenges, the terrain, due to which we are not able to go for fencing. We are not able to go for patrolling. Yes, difficult terrain. With that, you can also talk about the climate challenges, especially the Siachen Glacier will be quoting here. That's one of the highest war zone of the world. Then within this, include the infrastructure gap. That is one of the biggest challenges they want you to write. One of the biggest infrastructure gap, because now China is developing some model villages along the border. They are pushing for border development. They are going for settlement of their citizens in this area. They are referring to Jiaokong villages, the well-off villages. Jiaokong villages. That means well-off villages. So huge development for the people to move and settle around the borders. Yes. We'll be talking what India is doing. Yes. Now, to counter this, we have gone for developmental initiatives, and one of those is BADP. What is BADP? Border Area Development Program, that was initiated during the 7th five-year plans, near about in 1986, 1987. What was the objective? As the name itself says, that there will be proliferation of development near the areas. What do we mean by development? Development of infrastructure, development of roads, development of water canals. Yes. Development of education. We have residential academies in Jammu and Kashmir at near the border areas, border towns. Then healthcare. We have mobile medical units, you can mention. Then you can also talk about increased penetration in the quality of PHCs. The primary healthcare units here have increased and in sync with the Alma Ata Declaration. Yes. Then we are also promoting livelihood here. How are we promoting livelihood? We are promoting livelihood through skill development, tourism, through inputs on agriculture and allied sectors, etc. So we are providing largely in various dimension of the social setup. We are facilitating a good community development there through BADP, and it is done through MHA. Yes. So this is what you'll be mentioning. You can also include the recreational, that we are also creating sports infrastructure under BADP. Yes, each year with the budget, different directions are given that, okay, you'll be spending this much on this sector of the near the Pakistan border or this region of the China border. And this is how development is done under BADP. We'll be talking about that. Then we'll be talking about BIM. BIM is again another umbrella scheme that is central sector scheme. The government directly, the union government directly deals with the funding and implementation here. Now, it is also going for infrastructure development. For example, roads, Sela tunnel in Arunachal Pradesh has been developed under BIM. Then it is going for border security development. For example, it is going for fencing. It is providing for floodlights, etc. near the borders under BIM. It is developing surveillance technology, satellite-based monitoring. It is being done. Night vision devices, etc. are installed. It is creating integrated checkpost, which has been implemented in Kartarpur corridor. It has been implemented also in Nathula. It is developing border outpost to improve the conditions of the troop. For example, for supply of electricity, solar panels are being implemented. Yes, where there is, of course, here in BADP, electrification is also happening in the infrastructure section. Yes, this is under BIM. So this is what this question demands. I think at least you will be drawing two diagrams. One is map, and maybe at the start you can talk about when you are mentioning the borders in a transition from the introduction to the border area to the first heading. You can draw a diagram about the borders, sharing borders, or different challenges you are facing before this. Right. So this is what this question entails. In conclusion, again, you can always give your suggestion that what else can be done. For example, we can always talk about that there has to be symbiosis or synergy between these two, and this can be implemented with the new initiative since 2002, that is vibrant villages. To counter these, we are also creating vibrant villages. We'll be giving again on the similar lines some infrastructure, education, tourism, renewable energy, etc. is being provided for those villages. Yes. Moving on to the last question for internal security and last question of GS3 itself. Social media and encrypting messaging services pose a serious security challenge. Now we are talking about encryption is one of the biggest highlight of this question. Yes, we'll be talking about it. Now we have to talk about, then we'll be discussing measures and again other remedies, whatever are required. Before coming to measures, we'll be also talking about how it is a security challenge. Yes, so social media we'll be talking about. Within this, we'll be talking about encryption. How this is a encryption, this all is leading to a security concern. Then what measures have been adopted and what are the other remedies needed. Yes. Initially, we'll be talking about, okay, we are undergoing, as we have talked about earlier in the earlier question, that the digital revolution, what is happening in India, one of the offshoot is social media, through which people tend to connect with each other. And with the introduction of encryption, social media has become also a challenge or a tool for the non-state actors, for the anti-social elements to connect, coordinate, and implement their plans. Yes. Now, what is encryption? We know that do write the definition. Encryption is the mathematical algorithm to convert the readable data into non-readable, unreadable format. You can draw the diagram also, wherein you will be talking about readable data converted into encrypted data, that is known as ciphertext, and then it is transmitted and later deciphered and converted again into readable format. Here we have the encryption key that is generally public. The similar format is for all. Then there will be de-encryption key, and that is secret and private. Yes. So this is how encryption works. So this has created a new matrix for the security agencies to crack. Yes, you might have heard about the case wherein the FBI in US connected with CIA, the security agency there, the intelligence agency, to take out data from the iPhones. But the Apple as an organization to secure privacy rejected it altogether, and it went on for certain weeks. Yes, and they tried to explore this option without getting the consent from the Apple. They tried that if de-encryption can happen. Yes. Now, what are the security challenges? Just imagine from the perspective of an administrator, what security challenge can encryption create? First of all, it can create a tool for privacy of individuals or anonymity of individuals to create a radicalization. For example, they'll be creating or sharing some ideological indoctrination, sharing some text, etc., that this is what is required, etc., for to achieve this objective of a group, of a religion, of a setting, of a state, etc. Then you can also talk about they can spread fake news, misinformation and disinformation. Yes, there will be a lot of information asymmetry. We are talking about a lot of WhatsApp University, that this happened, that research happened. Now there is a eye drop which can create from which your lenses can be removed, etc. So these are all the fake news. Though it is not a security concern, what example I gave, but this is what it can do, and it will give, this encryption gives the confidence that their data is private and they cannot be caught. And this ultimately becomes a challenge for the security agencies to trace it back, that where it originated from, where this fake news originated from. Then it becomes a tool for cybercrime. Cybercrime and fraud, there will be phishing attacks, there will be cyberbullying, etc. Again, if they delete for all, etc. options are there, it becomes a challenge. Then with this, it becomes a privacy concern also for the individual. If it is not sure that if they are the owner of their personal data, how is whatever they are sharing on social media, etc., is it being tracked by certain individuals, even if it is a private profile? How the situation, how the, let's say, data fiduciary, how are they responding to requests from the non-state actors? How can they be blocked? Can they be, are able to get into the data code of it, etc.? So it becomes another challenge. One of the biggest challenges, the national security concern. How is that a concern? Because now, so that is how it creates national security concern also. And it is difficult to, as I discussed, monitor and track. Now, what are the, as it talks about the, what are the measures adopted? We can talk about various measures adopted. You can talk about the laws, the recent data protection law. You can talk about, as we just discussed, you can talk about the Digital India Act, etc. Then you can talk about, let's say, the fake news busting agencies have been created, as is the fact check unit of the PIB. So this is another initiative. Then cyber security related initiative, you can write multiple: cyber suraksha initiative, cyber swachhta kendra, cyber security policy, certain, yes, national cyber crime reporting portal. Yes, all this you can mention. Of course, you can again mention related to AI mission of India, AI for India 2.0 recently by MHA. etc. All this you'll be talking. Then we'll be talking about what are the other remedies. Now, beyond what has been done already, we need to ensure that there is no identity theft. For that, we can create new types of verifications. Not just you are not a robot. We can mention that we can get into a application, get into a device through, let's say, video proof or a video call, etc. That can be done, like recently done by Microsoft. Then you can also ensure that there is encryption scan. A technology is developed. Down the line, it will also be the case wherein it will be scanning the encryption and still maintain the privacy of the individual. This type of technology down the line would be developed. On the similar lines, you can also talk about that AI can ensure content moderation. Now the social media website, let's say Twitter or now X, etc., they are now highlighting, okay, this is a fake news or this is a content which has been modified, etc., to present. So it can rather, using AI down the line, remove it. All these you can creatively mention here. Then, of course, generally you can talk about digital literacy, digital rights, awareness, etc. You can always talk about. Yes. So this is what this question entails. So social media continues to be a part of our extended personality. In conclusion, you can talk about that encryption is one of the important inventions to ensure privacy of the individual is secure, but we have to balance it with the national security. Right? So that is it. I hope you had a good time and all the very best.